Please, please don't let her die on your doorstep. The words tore from Harold Whitfield's frostbitten lips at 11:47 on the coldest December night Montana had seen in 40 years. He was 78 years old and he was on his knees in 3 feet of snow, holding his wife of 54 years in his arms like she was made of glass in prayer. His Korean War service jacket was unzipped, wrapped around her thin shoulders. He had carried her the last 2 miles after the truck died, and his back was on fire, and his lungs were on fire, and his eyes were on fire because he was crying, but the tears froze before they could fall. He had pounded on the heavy steel door of the Iron Wolves clubhouse for nearly 4 minutes before anyone answered. He could hear music inside the low rumble of a generator, voices, laughter. He had begun to wonder if he was going to die on this porch with his wife in his arms, 20 feet from warmth and people, while a Hank Williams song played behind a door no one was opening. Then the door swung wide. The man who stood in the rectangle of yellow light was the biggest human being Harold had ever seen who was not in a uniform. 6'4", 240 pounds gray, streaking the dark beard. East blue eyes that took in the scene the way a doctor takes in a triage. Leather vest with patches Harold did not recognize. Tattoos crawling up the side of his neck. A scar that ran from his left eyebrow down past the corner of his jaw. The man did not speak. He looked at Harold. He looked at the woman in Harold's arms. He looked at the snow and the absence of a vehicle in his driveway and the way Harold's lips were the color of a bruise. Then he turned and shouted over his shoulder one word hard and flat. Bear. A second man appeared behind him, smaller, thinner, with a salt and pepper goatee and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He took one look and his face changed. Get them inside, now, 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 now. The big man, the one called Bear, bent and lifted Eleanor Whitfield out of her husband's arms like she weighed nothing. He did it so gently that, for a moment, Harold could not let her go. His fingers were locked around her wrist, and he could not feel them, and his brain would not tell them to release. Sir, the big man's voice was low and even. Sir, I have her. You have to let go now. You have to come inside. Harold let go. He tried to stand and his knees buckled. The man with the reading glasses caught him under the arm. Easy. Easy now, partner. We got you. Inside, inside, inside. The door closed behind them, and the wall of warmth hit Harold like a physical blow. He gasped and stumbled. There were faces. 6, 7, 8 men in leather vests, all of them frozen mid-motion staring. A pool table with someone's cue still in his hand. A jukebox playing low. The smell of wood smoke and coffee and gun oil. A man at the bar holding a beer halfway to his mouth. Bear carried Eleanor straight past all of them down a hallway through an open doorway that turned out to be a small infirmary, 2 beds, a metal cabinet on the wall, an oxygen tank in the corner. He laid her down on the bed nearest the window and started working immediately. He stripped the wet wool coat off her with the steady efficiency of a man who had done this 1,000 times in 1,000 worse places. He pressed 2 fingers against the carotid artery on her neck. He bent his ear to her mouth. Pulse is 42. Breathing is shallow but present. Severe hypothermia. Get me dry blankets, the warming pads from the cabinet, and tell Riggs to fire up the espresso machine for warm fluids. A young biker with a beard like a Viking turned and ran. Bear looked up at Harold for the first time since the doorway. Harold was standing in the doorway of the infirmary, swaying water dripping off him onto the wood floor. Sir, Bear's voice was calm. What is your wife's name? Eleanor? Harold's voice cracked. Her name is Eleanor. Ellie. Ellie. Bear leaned down close to her ear. Ellie, my name is Dominic Garrison. People call me Bear. I'm a combat medic, ma'am. I served 3 tours in Iraq and I have seen worse than you, and I am going to bring you back. I need you to stay with me. Squeeze my finger if you can hear me. For a long moment there was nothing. Then her gloved hand, gray and thin and frail, twitched against his. Bear exhaled slowly. Good. Good, Ellie. That's real good. You stay right here with me. Behind Harold in the main room, a younger man's voice rose sharp and angry. We don't even know who these people are, Bear. We don't know what they're running from. They could be wired up for all we know. They could have somebody following them. We don't bring strangers off the road in the middle of a goddamn blizzard. That has never been how we do business. You taught me that. Bear did not turn his head. He kept his eyes on Eleanor's face and his hand on her pulse. His name is Harold and her name is Eleanor, and they are an old man and a dying woman, Flint. Stand down. We don't know that. Look at her. I have looked at her, and I am telling you, we don't know anything about her except that she showed up at our door with no vehicle on the coldest night of the year. Where did they come from? What are they doing out here? There are no homes for 20 miles. None. Bear finally lifted his head. His ice blue eyes found the younger biker who was standing in the hallway with his arms crossed. The kid could not have been more than 32. Lean, hard, tattoos like spider webs down both forearms. A face that had decided a long time ago not to trust anything. Flint. Bear's voice did not rise. We will figure out who they are. We will figure out where they came from. We will figure out what they need. We will do all of that after I keep this woman from dying in my infirmary. Are we clear? Flint did not answer for a long moment. Then he turned and walked back down the hallway. The man with the reading glasses appeared with an armful of wool blankets and a heating pad. Behind him came the young Viking with a coffee mug full of steaming water. Bear took everything without thanking them. He stripped Eleanor's wet outer layers down to her thin underthings with the impersonal care of a hospital nurse, wrapped her in 3 layers of dry blanket, set the heating pads against her stomach and her neck and the inside of her thighs, and lifted the warm mug to her lips. Ellie, small sips, just small sips. There you go, sweetheart. She drank, a little. She coughed. She drank again. Harold sank down into the chair in the corner of the infirmary and put his face in his hands and wept without making any sound at all. The man with the reading glasses crouched in front of him and waited until Harold looked up. Mr. Whitfield, my name is Deacon Patterson. I'm vice president of this chapter. I need to ask you some questions if you can answer them. Harold nodded. How long were you out there? Truck died around 8:30. I tried to get her warm. The heater was the first thing to go. Battery, I think. I walked to a farmhouse 2 miles back. Nobody home. I came back and I tried to start the truck again, and I couldn't, and Ellie was getting bad, and I knew if we stayed, we'd freeze, and I had seen the lights of this place from the road. And so you carried her how far? I don't know. 2 miles, maybe more. The wind was bad. Deacon's eyes went to the floor for a second and then back up. He was 62 years old. There was kindness in him that he did not advertise. Sir, do you have any medical conditions we need to know about? You or your wife? Harold opened his mouth. He closed it. He opened it again. She has cancer. Pancreatic, stage 4. They gave her 3 weeks 4 days ago. Deacon's face did not change. He had seen what cancer did. His own wife had been taken by it 10 years prior. He had sat by her bed and held her hand and made her promises he did not know how to keep. He just nodded once. Where were you trying to get to, Mr. Whitfield? Silver Falls. Silver Falls is 95 miles north. I know. In December. I know. Harold's voice broke. I know. Why? Harold could not answer. He looked at Eleanor on the bed, wrapped in wool color beginning to come back into her cheeks, Bear murmuring something to her that Harold could not hear. He looked back at Deacon. Our son lives there. Nathan, we have not spoken in 7 years. Eleanor wants to see our grandson. She has never met him. He is 4 years old. Deacon let out a long breath through his nose. You drove from where? Wyoming. 12 hours. We left yesterday morning. The truck had been giving us trouble, but I thought we had one more long trip in her. I thought I was being smart. I thought he could not finish. Deacon put a hand on his knee. The hand was rough and warm. You did what you had to do, partner. You did what any man would do for his wife. I don't know if she's going to make it 3 more weeks, Deacon. The doctor said 3 weeks, but she got bad fast. She got real bad. And I knew if we waited, we would never get there. I knew we had to go now. I knew it. How long since you ate? Yesterday morning. We meant to stop, but Ellie didn't want anything, and I didn't want to leave her in the truck alone, and Deacon stood up. He looked toward the door of the infirmary. Colt. The young Viking biker appeared. Soup, bread, coffee, for the gentleman. Right now. Yes, sir. In the main room of the clubhouse, the 8 or 9 men who had been there when Harold and Eleanor stumbled in had been joined by 4 more. 12 in all. They were standing around the pool table now in a loose half circle, and they were arguing in low voices, and the one called Flint was at the center of it. He was tall and lean, and there was something in his face that did not bend. I'm not saying we throw them out, he was saying. I'm saying we don't go anywhere, we don't ride. We don't bleed time and gas and weather for two people who showed up out of nowhere with a sob story. We get them warm. We get them fed. We call the sheriff in the morning. The sheriff has a vehicle. The sheriff has a county and a budget. The sheriff is what they pay him for. A man named Torque. The chapter's mechanic, a wide-built man in his 50s with grease permanently in the lines of his hands, shook his head. Sheriff's going to put them in a motel. Sheriff's not going to drive an old woman 95 miles through a closed pass in December. Then they wait until spring. She doesn't have until spring. That is not our problem. 12 men went quiet. Torque's voice when he spoke again was very soft. Flint, look at me. That is not our problem. Are those the words you just said out loud in this room? I said what I said. Bear walked into the main room then. He looked at Flint for a long moment without speaking. Flint did not look away. Brother, Bear's voice was quiet. Step outside with me for a minute. I am not going outside. Step outside with me for a minute. They went outside, the door closed behind them. Through the door, the rest of the men could hear a low rumble of voices. They could not make out the words. They waited. After almost 6 minutes, the door opened again and Bear came in alone. Flint came in behind him with a face that was not different, but had something behind it that was a little softer than what had been there before. He did not look at the others. He walked to the bar and poured himself a coffee and sat down. Bear addressed the room. Brothers, we are going to vote in 20 minutes. I want everybody to think it through before we do. We are looking at riding an old man and a dying woman 95 miles through Bridger Pass in the middle of a December storm. Pass is technically closed, but I have made the call, and Sheriff Mathis says if a convoy of 15 wants to try it tomorrow at dawn, he will not put up roadblocks. We have to be self-sufficient. We have to be ready for anything. We have to understand that if she goes south on the road, it falls on us to bring her back, or to be the people who watched a woman die in a sidecar. Think hard. Pray on it if that is your way. We vote at 0100. He turned and went back down the hallway toward the infirmary. Harold was sitting beside the bed when Bear came back in. Eleanor's eyes were open. She was looking at her husband. Her hand was in his hand, and she was so thin that the wedding band she had worn for 54 years slid loose on her finger. Bear stopped just inside the door. He watched them for a moment the way an old soldier watches anything that reminds him of what he lost. Bear cleared his throat. Mr. Whitfield, Mrs. Whitfield, my boys are voting. I want you to know that. Eleanor's voice was a thread. You are a good son to your mother. Bear stood very still. She was lying back against 2 pillows. Her cheeks were pink. Her eyes were the gray blue of winter water, and there was a clarity in them that did not belong to a woman who had been close to dying 20 minutes earlier. She said it again softer. You are a good son to your mother, I can tell. I have been a mother 50 years, and I can tell. Bear opened his mouth. He closed it. He put his hand on the door frame and steadied himself. Ma'am, he cleared his throat again. My mother passed away while I was overseas. I have not been a son to her in 15 years. Eleanor's eyes did not move. I do not think that is true. I think you have been a son to her every day. I think she sees you. For a moment, Bear could not breathe. He stood there in the doorway of the infirmary, and his eyes filled, and he did not let the tears go, because that was not the kind of man he was. He nodded once. He stepped back into the hallway, and he stood with his back against the wall for almost a full minute before he could trust his face to be a face again. Harold watched her. He had not let go of her hand. Ellie. Yes, my love. You almost died out there. I know. I thought I had killed you. You haven't killed me. You carried me like a hero in a book. Harold made a sound that was not quite a laugh. Eleanor turned her face toward the window. There was nothing out there except the storm. Snow was coming sideways. It was almost beautiful the way the light from the window caught it. Harry. Yes, love. I want to see Nathan. I want to hold Liam. I have one thing left to do, and I cannot die before I do it. I know, Ellie. We will get there. I promise you we will get there. She closed her eyes. After a few minutes, her breathing went deep and even. Harold sat beside her and watched her chest rise and fall and did not let go of her hand. In the kitchen of the clubhouse, the young Viking biker named Colt set a bowl of beef stew and a plate of buttered bread and a mug of black coffee in front of Harold. Harold had not noticed Colt come in. Eat, sir. The kid was maybe 25. He had a face that had not yet been carved into anything permanent. Bear says you eat, or he sticks an IV in your arm and feeds you that way, and trust me on this, you would rather eat. Harold tried to smile and could not. He picked up the spoon. His hand shook and the spoon clattered against the bowl. He set it down. I'm sorry, son. Take your time. I haven't been able to. The shaking is not the cold. It's everything else. I know, sir. You don't know. No, sir. But I have eyes. Harold ate, slowly, most of the bowl, half the bread, all of the coffee. By the end of it, the shaking in his hands had eased a little. The clubhouse around him was alive in a way that did not feel like noise. There were men in the main room arguing and voices kept low. There were men in the kitchen on phones. He heard one of them, the man Bear had called Riggs, talking to somebody about weather radar and county snowplow schedules and the price of premium fuel at a station 30 miles north. He heard another voice talking to a veterinarian about somebody's dog that was supposed to be picked up tomorrow. He heard somebody on the back porch on a phone saying, I know it is the middle of the night, Mom, I know, but I needed to hear your voice. He looked up at Colt. Why are you doing this, any of this? Colt thought about it. He was not a fast thinker. He was a careful one. Mr. Whitfield, I don't know yet, sir. I just know I am. Outside on the back porch, the man named Bear stood in the cold without a jacket and let the snow land in his beard. He had a cigarette he had not lit because he had quit 11 years ago, and tonight he just wanted to hold one. He stared out over the white field that ran down behind the clubhouse to a stand of black pines. Mom, he said to nobody. Mom, can you hear this old woman? She said you can see me. The wind did not answer. He stood there a long time. Inside, Harold had finished his coffee. He set the cup down. Colt took it without speaking. Harold pushed back from the table and tried to stand, and found that his legs did not entirely want to. Easy, sir. Where are you trying to go? Out to the truck. I forgot. There are things in the truck. Her medicine, her thing, the cushion, she can't sit without it. And there are some papers. Sit down. I'll send somebody. Where's the truck? 2 miles back. South, a green Chevy K10. The keys are still in it. I didn't lock it. I should have. I had her. Colt squeezed Harold's shoulder. Sir, you carried your wife 2 miles through a Montana blizzard tonight. Don't apologize to me about anything. Stay here. Drink another cup of coffee. We will get your truck. 20 minutes later, Torque and Riggs and the young Viking Colt rolled out of the clubhouse garage in a battered Dodge Power Wagon with chains on all 4 tires and a worn winch on the front. They drove south down the unplowed county road into the teeth of the storm. They found the green Chevy K10 buried in a drift up to the wheel wells, about 1.75 miles from the clubhouse. They winched it out, attached a tow strap, and brought it home. It took them an hour and 40 minutes round trip. When they got the K10 into the garage and into the warm Torque, popped the hood and looked at the engine and shook his head and started talking to himself softly the way mechanics do when they are calculating. Riggs and Colt opened the cab and the camper shell to gather what was inside. There was an old wool blanket, a canvas overnight bag, a leather toiletry kit, a blue plastic case of medications, half of which the labels they could not pronounce, a photograph of a young man and a young woman and a baby, faded, the colors gone red, a coffee can full of buttons. And in the back of the cab, half slid under the bench seat, was a cardboard banker's box. Riggs pulled it out. It was heavy. The lid was loose. He lifted the lid and looked inside. Hey, Torque, look at this. What? Look at this. Torque came around. He looked into the box. He whistled low. The box was full of envelopes, stuffed, maybe 100. They were all the same size. They were all addressed in the same careful old man's handwriting. They were all addressed to the same person, Nathan Whitfield. They were all stamped. They were all marked in red ink, every single one of them returned to sender. Torque picked one up. The postmark was 4 years old. He picked up another. 6 years. Another. 2 years. He fanned through them. Some were thin, some were thick. Every single one had been refused. He counted them. There were 84 envelopes in the box. 84 letters, he said, over 7 years, sent back, every single one. Riggs let out a long breath. Damn. But then Torque flipped through them again. He frowned. He picked them out one by one and lined them up by postmark on the workbench. He went left to right. He went front to back. He counted again. What? Riggs said. What is it? There's a gap. There's supposed to be one more. Look at the dates. They are monthly. Look. June, July, August, September. Then October. Then December. There is no November. The November letter is not in the box. So either he did not send one that month or somebody pulled one out of the box. The two men looked at each other. Torque carried the box upstairs. He set it on the bar in the main room. Bear and Deacon were sitting at the bar with cups of kivvy and a clipboard between them. They had a map of Highway 89 unrolled and weighted down with 2 beer bottles and somebody's reading glasses. Bear looked up. What? Found this in the truck. Read what it is. Bear read. He read for a long time. He read the postmarks. He counted the letters. He listened to Torque's theory about the missing November envelope. He set the lid back on the box. We don't say anything to either of them about this tonight, he said. Why not, Torque said. Because there is nothing they can do about it tonight. Because that old man is going to fall asleep in the next 10 minutes, whether he wants to or not, and that woman needs every minute of rest she can find before tomorrow. We will figure out the letters when we are on the road, and they are stronger. Deacon nodded. He was looking at the box with the look of a man who had seen too much of his own life in it. Bear stood up. It is 12:58, brothers. The vote is at 1. Round up the boys. By 1 in the morning, the 12 men of the Iron Wolves chapter and the 3 prospects who were eligible to weigh in were standing or sitting in a rough horseshoe around the pool table. The room smelled of wood smoke and coffee and wet leather. The storm pressed against the windows. Bear stood at the head of the table. He did not raise his voice. Brothers, we have an old man and a dying woman in the back of this clubhouse who need an escort to Silver Falls in the morning. 95 miles, Bridger Pass, December. I will not lie to you and tell you it is going to be a simple ride. We will eat hard miles tomorrow. We will use up every favor we have with the county. We may bury one of those 2 people somewhere between here and there, and we will have to live with that. I want you to vote with your eyes open. By show of hands, all in favor. Hands came up, slowly at first, then quickly, then they all came up, even Flint's. He did not look at anybody when he raised it. He just raised it. Bear closed his eyes for a second. Unanimous, we ride at 0630, layered up full tanks, extra fuel cans on the chase truck. Torque, you take the wagon and rig out for medical contingency. Riggs, you ride sweep. Colt, you take point with me. Deacon, you stay with the principals in the wagon. The rest of you spread between. Get sleep if you can. I want every man on his bike before sunup. The room emptied. Flint did not go to sleep. He went outside. He stood on the porch in the snow. He smoked a cigarette. He had told himself he was not going to smoke. He thought about what Bear had said to him out there, the words that nobody else had heard, and he thought about the woman in the back room who had told Bear his mother could see him. He thought about a foster home in Spokane when he was 8 years old. He stubbed the cigarette out on the porch rail. The clubhouse was a dim, quiet space at 2 in the morning. The fire in the wood stove had burned down to embers. Bear had taken the long couch by the window. Deacon was in a recliner with his reading glasses on his chest. Torque was in a sleeping bag on the floor near the infirmary, in case Eleanor needed anything during the night. Harold had refused a bed in the dormitory wing and had instead pulled a wooden chair next to Eleanor's bed and fallen asleep sitting up with his hand on hers. In her bed, Eleanor woke briefly somewhere around 3. She looked across the small room at her husband sleeping in the chair. She looked at the leather jacket somebody had draped over his shoulders. She looked at the lamp somebody had left on it low so he would not wake in darkness. She smiled. The smile stayed on her face when she went back to sleep. Outside, Bear lay on the couch staring at the ceiling with his hand flat on his chest. Inside the chest pocket of the leather vest hanging over the arm of the couch was a folded envelope. The envelope had been folded and refolded so many times that the creases were like cloth. The paper was the color of old butter. There was a date in pencil on the back. December 11, 2010. He had been carrying it for 15 years. He had not opened it. He thought about that letter the way a man thinks about a door he keeps walking past and never opens. He had not been able to read it the week she died, and then he had not been able to read it the year she died, And then it had become a thing he did not look at, and now it was a thing he could not look at. He carried it everywhere. The old woman in the back room had said his mother could see him. He did not know if that was true. He did not know what he would do if it was. He closed his eyes. At 5:30 in the morning, the clubhouse was already moving. Engines were idling in the lot to warm them. Headlights cut through the dark and the still falling snow. Riggs and a prospect named Caleb were loading fuel cans and a small jerrycan of kerosene and a propane heater into the bed of the power wagon. Torque was in the infirmary running his hand under Eleanor's chin to check the warmth at her neck. Bear knelt by the bed. Eleanor was awake. She was thinner this morning than she had been the night before. There was already a difference. She was a candle, and the candle had been left in a draft, and she was burning faster than she should. Mrs. Whitfield, we ride at 6:30. I am going to put you in the back of the chase truck with my friend Deacon. He will be with you the entire way. There is a heater, and there is a bed, and there is oxygen if you need it. I will be on a bike behind your husband. There will be 14 other bikes around us. You will not be alone for a single minute. Do you understand me? Yes? Are you afraid? Number. Are you sure? Yes, I have been afraid for 9 months. I'm done with it. Bear looked at her for a long moment. Yes, ma'am. She reached out a hand. He took it. Her grip was less than the grip of a child, but there was something in it that was not weak. I want to tell you something, she said. While I am clear, I will not be clear all day. Will you listen? I will listen, ma'am. When you get back to your mother's grave, tell her I said hello. Tell her I said her son is a good man. Tell her I said the work she did was not wasted. Will you tell her that? Bear could not speak. I know I am asking a lot, she said, but I do not get to meet her now, and I would like her to know. Will you tell her? Bear nodded. He could not get a word out. Good. She closed her eyes. Now help me sit up. I want to put on my own coat for this. I do not want to leave this place looking like a sick woman. I want to walk out on my own feet. Help me up, son. He helped her up. Harold was already in the main room. He had a fresh wool sweater that Riggs had given him over his old service jacket. He had eaten 2 eggs and a piece of toast. He had a cup of coffee in his hand, and his hand was not shaking. He stood near the window, watching the lot fill with bikes. There were 15 of them now, lined up in 2 ragged rows, all running all chrome and steel and patches catching the lot lights. Bear came up beside him. Sir, yes, there is something in the truck we found last night that I want to talk to you about. But not now, on the road. When we have time. Is that all right? Harold turned and looked at him. The old man's eyes were clear. What is it? A box of letters? To your son. All sent back. We are bringing them with us. Harold went still. The November letter is not in the box, Bear said. Only the November letter. Did you keep it back, sir? Harold did not answer for a long time. Then he shook his head once. I sent them all, he said. Every month. Every single month. I never missed one. Bear nodded slowly. We will figure it out, sir. The wind howled at the windows. Outside, Flint sat on his bike in the lead position alongside Bear's empty bike. He was the youngest man in the front of the formation. He looked back at the clubhouse door, and he waited. At 6:27, Bear walked Eleanor Whitfield out of the clubhouse on his arm. She wore her wool coat and her husband's old service jacket over it, and a knit hat the color of dried lavender that Riggs's wife had sent down with him the previous Christmas. She wore a smile that was small and absolutely real. Harold walked behind her with Deacon at his elbow. 15 Harley engines came up to full throat in the parking lot at the same instant. The sound of them rolled out across the snow field behind the clubhouse and rolled back. Eleanor Whitfield, 75 years old, pancreatic cancer stage 4, 3 weeks to live, stopped on the second step of the porch and stood very still and let the sound wash over her. She turned her head and looked at Bear. I have never heard anything so beautiful, she said. Bear smiled. That, ma'am, is the sound of you being escorted home. She went down the steps on his arm, and they put her in the back of the warm truck, and Deacon climbed up beside her and closed the door. Bear walked back to his bike. He swung a leg over the saddle. He looked at the formation behind him. 15 men in leather. 15 engines burning. The storm had eased slightly. A cold gray dawn was beginning to come up behind the pines. He looked at Flint. Flint nodded once. Bear pulled out of the lot, and the Iron Wolves chapter pulled out behind him 2 by 2 with an old man's pickup and a dying woman's truck in the middle of them. and the convoy turned north onto Highway 89, and the run for Silver Falls began. The first 30 miles were the easiest. The plow had been through the lower stretch of Highway 89 sometime in the small hours, and the road was packed snow but passable. The convoy held a steady 40 miles an hour. Bear rode point with Flint beside him. The power wagon rolled in the middle of the formation with Riggs driving and Eleanor lying back on the small fold-down bed in the rear cab, with Deacon Patterson seated on a milk crate beside her. Harold rode shotgun. He kept turning back to look at his wife. He kept reaching back to touch her hand. He could not stop himself. Eleanor was awake but very quiet for the first hour. She watched the snow go past the window. She listened to the steady drum of 15 Harley engines around her. Once she said to Deacon, "How do they ride when it is so cold? How do their hands not freeze on the bars?" Deacon smiled. "Ma'am, those men have ridden through worse than this. They have ridden through hail and through hurricane season in Texas and through black ice on a mountain pass at midnight. They have ridden when they should not have been able to ride. They will be fine." "How long have you been a biker, Deacon?" 41 years next March." "That is a long time to do anything." "Yes, ma'am." She turned her head and looked up at the ceiling of the cab. "I was a teacher, 3rd grade, for 38 years. That is a long time, too." She smiled with her eyes closed. "I had a student once, his name was Tommy Lawler. He could not read in October. He could read in May. The whole year I worked with him. The whole year. I had a husband and a son at home, and a house to run and dinner to cook every night, and I gave that boy an hour after school 3 days a week for the whole year. And in May, he read me a book, and he cried, and I cried." Deacon listened. "I have not thought about Tommy Lawler in 20 years, she said. "I wonder what happened to him." She slept for a while. The second hour was harder. The wind picked up. The snow that had eased at dawn started to come down again, thick now in fat, heavy flakes that piled on the windshields of the bikes faster than the riders could wipe them clear. The formation slowed to 25 miles an hour. Bear called the convoy down on the radio handheld, and they tightened up the bikes, coming closer together, the lights forming a single moving column of brightness, moving north through a world that had gone gray and white and silent. At mile 37, Eleanor woke up and grabbed for Deacon's hand, and her face went white. "Deacon, Deacon, something is wrong." "Stay with me, Eleanor. Tell me what." My chest is..." Deacon grabbed the radio. Bear, we got a problem. The principal is having chest pain. Hold the convoy." The 15 bikes peeled off into a turnout at the edge of an unplowed access road. Bear came off his bike at a run before it had stopped rolling. He yanked open the back door of the power wagon and was inside in 2 motions. Eleanor was clutching her chest with both hands. Her face was the color of wet paper. Her eyes were wide. Bear pressed 2 fingers against her neck. Heart rate 150 and climbing. Atrial fib, looks like. Deacon, the metal case under the bench, the little blue bottle, and the nitroglycerin spray. Now. Deacon pulled them out. Bear sprayed under her tongue. He counted to 30. He sprayed again. He held her hand and he made her look at him. "Eleanor, look at me. Look at me. Listen to my voice. You are not having a heart attack. You are having an arrhythmia. We are going to bring this down. Breathe with me. In for 4, out for 6. Slow, slow. There you go. There you go." Harold had climbed in through the mom and was on his knees beside her, his face inches from hers. He was not breathing. "Harry," Bear did not look at him. "Harry, breathe." "Sir, breathe. You are no good to her if you pass out." Harold breathed. For 3 full minutes, nobody in that truck spoke except Bear and Eleanor. He counted. She breathed. The rate slowed. The color came back into her cheeks. She closed her eyes and leaned her head back against the small pillow. "Better," she whispered. "You sure?" Yes, better." Bear sat back on his heels. He let out a breath. "Eleanor," he spoke very gently, "we are about an hour and a half from Bozeman. There is a hospital there. I want you to consider letting us turn off and take you in. Number, Eleanor. No, son. Listen to me. If I go into that hospital, I am not coming out. I know that. Harry knows that. We did not drive 12 hours and walk through a snowstorm and ask you good men to ride a closed pass for me to go die in a Bozeman emergency room. I did not come this far to die before I get to him. But, no buts." She opened her eyes and looked straight at Bear. I will die when I die, son. I will not die in a hospital. I will die in my boy's house with my grandson on the floor playing with whatever he plays with and my husband holding my hand. That is the deal I made with God 3 months ago, and God said yes, and I am holding him to it. Bear looked at her. He looked at Harold. He looked at Deacon. He looked back at her. Yes, ma'am. He got out of the truck. He stood in the snow for a minute. He looked at the long line of his brothers on their bikes, idling, waiting on his word. He pulled the radio off his belt. Brothers, principal is stable. We are continuing. Bozeman exit in 60. We push through. He swung onto his bike. The convoy rolled. They got another 22 miles before the next thing went wrong. Just south of the town of Wilsall, where the highway narrows down to 2 lanes and the cottonwoods crowd the shoulder, a Park County Sheriff's deputy stood in the middle of the road waving them down. Behind him, a county cruiser sat angled across the southbound lane with its lights bouncing red and blue off the snow. Bear held up his hand and brought the convoy to a slow stop. The deputy was young. He could not have been 30. His name tag said Graves, and his cheeks were red with cum, and he had the stiff posture of a man who had not been on the job long enough to know how to talk to 15 bikers. Sir, the deputy said to Bear, I need you to turn this convoy around. Bear killed his engine. He let his boot heels sink into the packed snow. He pushed his sunglasses up onto his forehead. Deputy Graves, good morning. We are aware that Bridger Pass has restrictions. Sheriff Mathis cleared us at 0400. I have his cell number if you want to verify. Sheriff Mathis is in Livingston, sir. I am the deputy on this stretch of road, and I am telling you the road is unsafe, and I am asking you to turn around. There has been 2 accidents north of here in the last hour. One of them was a fatality. I'm sorry to hear that. Sir, deputy, I have a passenger in the chase truck who is medically critical, and we are escorting her to Silver Falls. We have prepared for this run. We have chains. We have a wagon equipped for medical. I have a former Navy combat medic on every other bike. I am not going to turn around. Sir, this is not a request. Bear looked past the deputy at the cruiser. Inside the cruiser sat an older man in a sheriff's uniform, watching them through the windshield. The older man's expression did not change, but Bear had been alive long enough to know the difference between a man who was waiting and a man who was watching. Harold had climbed out of the power wagon. He walked up to the front of the convoy with his hands held away from his body palms forward the way a man walks who has spent time in places where soldiers shoot first. He came up beside Bear. Deputy, I am Harold Whitfield. I am the husband of the woman in the truck. Can I have a word? Sir, please get back in the vehicle. Son, Harold's voice was very steady. Look at me a minute. I am 78 years old. I was a corporal in the 2nd Infantry Division. I came home from Korea in '54 with a piece of shrapnel in my back, and my wife is in that truck right there. She has cancer of the pancreas. She has 3 weeks left. She has never met our grandson. He is 4 years old. He is in Silver Falls. He is 93 miles north. These men are riding for me. I will get back in that truck if you tell me to. But I am asking you, son to son, I am asking you, soldier to soldier, if you have any of that in you. Let us through. The deputy did not speak. The cruiser door opened and the older sheriff stepped out. Square-shouldered, iron gray hair, a long jaw like a man who had spent his life saying no. He walked up. He looked at Harold for a long moment. Mr. Whitfield. He took off his glove and held out his hand. Sheriff Hank Coltrane, Park County. My father served in Korea, 47th Infantry. He had shrapnel in his hip until the day he died. Harold took the hand. Sir. Sheriff Coltrane turned to his deputy. Graves, stand down. Pull the cruiser to the shoulder. Let these men through. Sir, the roads are. I said let them through. The deputy stood for a moment with his mouth slightly open, then turned and walked back to the cruiser. Sheriff Coltrane gave Harold a small nod. He looked at Bear. What is your route past Wilsall? 89 to Ringling, then 86 north up through Maudlow, then the back way up over Bridger. Sheriff Coltrane shook his head. 86 is closed 2 miles past Maudlow. Tree across the road. County crew won't be out till noon. You'll have to take the old 16-mile cut, the Forest Service Road. It is rough, but it is open. I drove it last night. The convoy waited while Bear pulled out a map and the sheriff drew a route in pencil. When they were done, Sheriff Coltrane looked at Harold one more time. You go give your wife a hug from a man whose daddy made it home. Harold nodded. He could not speak. The convoy rolled past the cruiser and continued north. In the back of the power wagon, Eleanor reached for Deacon's hand. What happened, she said. The sheriff let us through. How? Your husband asked nice. Eleanor smiled with her eyes closed. He is good at that. He looks tough, but he is the gentlest man I ever knew. Did I ever tell you how we met? No, ma'am. A church social in 1967. He had just come back from Korea. He stood by the punch bowl and he did not dance. I went up to him and I asked him to dance. I had decided I was going to marry him before he opened his mouth. 3 months later, he asked me. I said yes before he finished the question. She laughed softly. Deacon laughed with her. The convoy crossed Wilsall at 20 miles an hour. Children in coats stood by the sides of the road watching 15 bikes go through. An old man in a doorway tipped his hat. A woman pulled out a phone and took a picture. A church bell rang the 10 o'clock hour as they cleared the last block of town and turned north into open country. At 11:15, they pulled into a Sinclair station 15 miles north of the town of Clyde Park. It was the last station before the country road dropped down into the long approach to the pass. They needed fuel. They needed to check on Eleanor. They needed to give the riders 5 minutes off the bikes. The station was old. A green Sinclair dinosaur on a sign, 2 pumps, a small clapboard building with a hand-lettered sign in the window. The owner, a thin man with a wool cap pulled down over his ears, came out to look at them when 15 bikes and a pickup and a power wagon all pulled in at once. He took a long look. He went back inside and put on a fresh pot of coffee. The bikers fueled up in shifts. Riggs went inside and bought a stack of paper cups and 3 pounds of jerky and 4 boxes of granola bars. He paid in cash. The owner gave him back $12, and Riggs handed it back to the owner and said, put it in the till for the next person who comes in cold. Deacon climbed down from the power wagon and stretched. His back made a noise. He walked over to the corner of the lot near the propane cage where a man could get a smoke without being in the wind. Flint was already there. Flint had his helmet off. He was leaning against the cage with 1 foot up on the bottom rail. He was smoking a hand-rolled cigarette. He did not look at Deacon when the older biker came up beside him. Flint. Deacon, I want to talk to you. I figured you did. Deacon took out a hard pack of Marlboros and shook one loose. He had not smoked in 3 years. He lit it anyway. The first drag burned his lungs. He did not care. You were going to leave. I was thinking about it. When we got back on the bikes, was going to peel off at Ringling. Tell Bear my left cylinder was knocking. Ride back to the clubhouse alone. Why? Flint looked at his cigarette. He looked at the snow on the pumps. He looked at the gray sky. Because I do not believe in this. In what? In any of it. The riding 95 miles for 2 strangers. The using up favors with the sheriff. The 84 letters in the box and the missing November letter. And the old man crying in the doorway. And the dying lady saying nice things about Bear's mother. The whole, He stopped. He could not find the word. The whole sentimentality of it, Deacon offered. Flint nodded. The whole sentimentality of it. Deacon took a long pull on the cigarette. Flint, he spoke slowly. I am going to tell you something, and you are going to listen to me. Are you listening? I am listening. My wife Sarah died of pancreatic cancer 10 years ago. She was 51. 27 years we were married. She had 3 months on the diagnosis, and she got 6 weeks of those 3 months before she went bad. Her mother was in Florida. For 2 months, we kept saying we should fly her mother up to see Sarah, and we had not done it. We had time. The week before Sarah went bad, I told her mother on the phone, I said, Ruth, give us 2 more weeks. We have a wedding to do for my nephew, and after that, we will fly you up. She did not have 2 more weeks. She had 6 days. Her mother got there the day after she died. I picked her up at the airport, 80 years old. She got off the plane and she could not stand, and I held her up under one arm and her sister held her under the other, and she said, where is my baby? And I said, Sarah is gone, Ruth, with my own mouth. Flint had stopped smoking. He was holding the cigarette down by his side. Sarah did not get to say goodbye to her mother because I thought I had time. I thought there was always time. I was 49 years old and I thought there was always time. I was wrong, kid. I was so goddamn wrong. And the rest of my life, every single time I see an old woman who is dying and an old husband who is trying to get her one more day with somebody she loves, I think about Ruth getting off that plane. Flint said nothing. That is why I do not believe in not driving them, Deacon said. That is why I do not believe in calling the sheriff. That is why I do not believe in turning around. That is why every time some old lady walks into our clubhouse in a snowstorm and asks for help, I will say yes. Every time. Until I'm too old to put my leg over a bike. That is why. Flint looked down. He cleared his throat. He looked back up. His face was different. Deacon, why are you telling me this? Because I think you wanted me to. Flint took a long breath. He let it out slow. He put the cigarette out against the propane cage. He watched the ember die. I never knew my mother, he said. I want to be clear about that. I never knew her. She left me in a hospital lobby in Spokane when I was 6. She walked out and she did not come back. I was in foster care from 6 to 18. I had 13 different houses. The last one was not bad. The other 12 were. I learned a long time ago that family is just a word people use when they want you to do things for them. So when I see an old man asking for help getting back to a son that cut him off, I do not think about family. I think about the kid in the lobby in Spokane. Deacon listened. You think Bear should have called the cops? Flint said. That is what I told him last night. I told him we should call the cops and let them figure it out. You know what he said to me? You know what he told me out there on the porch? What? He said Flint, the kid in the lobby in Spokane, was waiting for a hand on his shoulder. And nobody came. Now we have a chance to be the hand on somebody else's shoulder. That is the work. The kid in the lobby in Spokane was waiting for a hand on his shoulder. Deacon nodded. That is right. Flint stood for a long time looking at the propane cage. He did not say anything. After almost a minute, he reached up and wiped his eye with the back of his glove. Deacon, I want to ask you a question. Ask. Do you think she was telling the truth? The old lady, when she said Bear's mother could see him. Deacon thought about it. I think she believes it. That is not the same as it being true. Number. Flint looked at him. But I think the old lady has been a mother for 50 years and a teacher for 38 years. And she has read a great many faces of a great many men. And she looked at Bear and she said what she said. And I think you and I are not in any position, you and I, to tell that woman she is wrong about something she has spent her whole life learning. Flint nodded slowly. Deacon clapped him on the shoulder. We ride in 3 minutes, brother. You with us. I am with you. The convoy rolled out of the Sinclair at 11:37. They climbed out of the river valley and turned northwest up the old 16-mile, cut a Forest Service road that was barely a road built for logging trucks and elk hunters, 2 ruts and a long climb between black timber on both sides. The road had been plowed by somebody, sometime in the last 24 hours, but the wind had filled the ruts in again, and the convoy moved slow, single file. Now the bikes ahead of the power wagon ahead of 3 sweep bikes at the back, all of them grinding up the long slope at 15 miles an hour with their headlights cutting cones through the white. They climbed for an hour without seeing another vehicle. At 1:14 in the afternoon, Bear rounded a long curve at the top of a saddle and slammed his front brake. The whole convoy stopped. The road ahead of them was gone. A rock slide had come down off the east face of the ridge sometime in the night. Tons of rock and snow and broken timber lay across the road for 40 feet. The pile was 8 feet high in the middle. There was no way around it. The drop-off to the right was a 40-foot grade into a creek bed. The cliff on the left was vertical. Bear sat on his bike with his hands on the bars and looked at it. Behind him, 14 engines idled in the snow. He pulled out the radio. Brothers, off the bikes, we dig. Nobody asked questions. Nobody complained. Nobody said it was impossible. 15 men killed their engines and put down their kickstands and walked up to the pile of rock and snow and timber, and they started to clear it. They had 2 shovels in the power wagon. 2 for 15 men. The other 13 worked with their hands. They wore leather gloves, and the leather gloves were not enough. After 10 minutes, the gloves were soaked through, and after 20 minutes, the men's fingers were going numb, and after 30 minutes, the first knuckles started to bleed. They did not stop. Torque rigged a tow strap to the front of the power wagon and dragged the biggest tree trunk off the road by inches. Riggs and Colt pried at a boulder the size of a refrigerator with a steel bar from the truck. Bear and Deacon and three others shoveled and threw snow over the cliff to the right and rolled the smaller rocks off the side. And at the front of the line doing the hardest digging was Flint. He did not say a word for 40 minutes. He worked. He used his hands when his shovel was needed elsewhere. He levered boulders out of the snow with his shoulder against them. His leather glove on his right hand split open across the knuckles in the first hour. He kept digging. The blood from his knuckles ran red into the white snow, and he did not seem to notice. He worked like a man trying to dig his way out of something. Bear watched him out of the corner of his eye and did not say anything. At 2:47 in the afternoon, they had cleared a single lane through the pile. Not pretty, not safe, passable. The bikes could thread through one at a time. The power wagon could ease through with two men on either side guiding it. Bear straightened up. His back was killing him. His hands were shaking. He looked at his brothers. They were a mess, wet to the skin, bleeding from a half-dozen places, frost in their beards, sucking air. He started to laugh. It started low in his belly. It came up out of him slow. He laughed until he was bent over with his hands on his knees. Torque joined in, then Colt, then all of them. They laughed at the pile of rocks. They laughed at the storm. They laughed at the absurdity of 15 American men in leather riding 95 miles in December for an old woman they had not known existed 20 hours earlier. Flint did not laugh. He just stood there with his bloody glove and a half smile on his face, and that was the most that anybody who knew him had seen out of him in 7 years. Deacon came up beside him and handed him a flask. "Drink this." "What is it?" "Brandy." Flint drank, he coughed, he handed it back. "Thank you. You did good work, son." Flint looked at his hands. He looked at the cleared road. He looked back at Deacon. "It was not work for them, was it?" He nodded toward the power wagon. "It was work for me." Deacon smiled. "You figure that one out on your own, and you have got something, brother." The radio on Bear's belt buzzed. He pulled it off. It was Caleb the prospect who had stayed back at the clubhouse to watch the place. His voice came through, scratched and small. Bear, you got a copy." "Yeah, go." "Bear, we got broken windows. Somebody hit the clubhouse. North wall. They were in and out in less than 10 minutes. They took the cash box from the bar and the rifle from the case behind the bar, and they keyed up 4 bikes in the garage. Brutus chased them off. We are okay. We are okay. But they hit us." Bear was silent. "Bear." "Yeah. You want us to call it in? Call the county. File a report. Don't chase. Don't call anybody. We will handle it when we get back." "Roger." Bear killed the radio. Deacon was watching him. "What?" "Clubhouse got hit." "When?" "Sometime in the last hour." "Who?" "Does not matter. We finish the ride, we deal with it after." Deacon nodded. The convoy threaded through the cleared lane, one bike at a time. They lost 40 minutes on the slide. They lost another 15 minutes putting Eleanor's medication back into a heated insulator in the power wagon because the cold had crystallized 2 of her vials. They lost another 5 minutes because Colt's bike would not start until Torque tapped the starter solenoid with a wrench 3 times. At 3:18 in the afternoon, 11 miles short of Silver Falls, the convoy was back to road speed and dropping out of the high country toward the long valley where the town sat under a column of wood smoke and a low gray sky. In the back of the power wagon, Eleanor opened her eyes. She had been sleeping, or what passed for sleeping. Her breathing had gone shallow and steady and very far away. Deacon had been watching her face. He knew the look. He had seen it on his Sarah. Eleanor's eyes opened. She looked at the ceiling of the truck. She said, "Oh." Deacon leaned in. "Eleanor." Hey, stay with me." "Eleanor." She did not speak. Her eyes did not move. Her lips were turning a color they should not have been. Deacon grabbed the radio. Bear, now." The convoy braked hard. Bear came off the bike at a run before it stopped rolling. He was in the back of the truck inside 10 seconds. Eleanor was not breathing. Bear pressed 2 fingers to her neck. No pulse. He did not say anything. He did not curse. He did not look at Harold, who was already climbing in through the cab. He simply went to work. He laid Eleanor flat. He tilted her chin back. He started chest compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Harold was making a sound that was not crying. It was lower than crying. It was the sound of something inside an old man breaking very quietly. Deacon put both hands on Harold's shoulders and held him at the side of the bed. Harry, look at me. Look at me. Bear has her. Bear has her. Bear is going to bring her back. Look at me, brother. The compressions went on. Bear's face was set. He did not look up. He did not stop. 40 seconds. A minute. A minute and 10 seconds. Bear bent and breathed into her mouth. 2 breaths. He resumed. Outside the truck, the entire convoy stood in the road with their helmets off. Nobody spoke. Engines were ticking as they cooled. The wind moved the trees on the ridge above them. Snow continued to fall slowly now, the way snow falls when it is tired. Flint stood in the middle of the road with his eyes closed and his hand on his chest. He had not prayed since he was 12 years old. He was praying now. He did not know what he was praying to. He prayed anyway. A minute and 40 seconds. Bear breathed for her again. A minute and 50. Bear pressed his fingers against her neck. Eleanor took a long, shuddering breath. Her eyes opened. They focused. She looked up at Bear. She said, "Oh, son." Bear sat back on his heels. He put his hand over his mouth. She turned her head on the small pillow. She looked at Harold. Harold was bent forward over the bed with his forehead against her side. He was weeping without sound. "Harry," she said. "Harry, look at me." He lifted his head. "I saw her, Harry. I saw my mother. She was standing on the porch of the house in Cody, the one we lived in before you got home from Korea. The yellow one. She had on the green apron. She was waving at me. I told her I was coming. I told her I was so happy to see her. She said no. She said, go back. She said, you have one thing left to do. She said, go on home and finish it. She closed her eyes. I am going to finish it, Harry. I am not done. She opened her eyes again. They were clear. Bear, how long until we are there? He had to clear his throat twice before he could speak. 11 miles, ma'am. Eleanor turned her face toward the window. Then let us go, son. The convoy rolled. They came down out of the foothills at 20 miles an hour. They came past a stand of cottonwoods. They came past a cattle gate where a brown horse stood in the snow watching them go. They came past a Methodist church with a wooden cross out front and a hand-painted sign that said, today is a gift. They came past a Sinclair station and a feed store and a Wells Fargo branch and a barber shop with a striped pole. They came onto Main Street of Silver Falls, Montana at 3:51 in the afternoon on a Saturday in December. 15 Harley-Davidsons and a green Chevy K10 with a flat front tire and a Dodge Power Wagon with chains on all 4 tires, and the people on the sidewalk stopped to look at them because nothing like that came through Silver Falls in December or in any month. They turned off Main onto Elder Avenue, then left on Birch, then down a long street lined with bare maples and old houses until Harold lifted his hand and pointed at a small blue 2-story with a white porch and a wreath on the door. That is Nathan's house. The convoy pulled to a stop in front of the blue house. 15 engines idled in the street. Snow drifted down through the headlights. In the upstairs window of the house, a curtain moved. A small face appeared. A little boy, maybe 4 years old, light brown hair, his nose pressed against the glass. Behind him, indistinct, a taller figure. The curtain dropped. For one long moment, nothing happened. Then the front door opened. A man stood on the porch in a flannel shirt and stocking feet. He was 45 years old. He had the same long jaw as his father and the same gray-blue eyes as his mother. His hair was thinning at the crown. He had a coffee cup in front of his hand, and he had forgotten he was holding it because he was staring at the line of bikes in his street, and he was not breathing. Behind him in the doorway, the little boy peered around his legs. Bear cut his engine. Behind him, 14 other men cut theirs. The street went silent except for the soft fall of snow. Harold opened the cab of the Power Wagon. He climbed down slowly. He walked across the snow to the foot of the porch steps. He looked up at his son. He could not speak. Nathan looked at his father. He looked at the Power Wagon. He looked back at his father. He said, Dad. He said it the way a 45-year-old man says it when he has not said the word out loud to his father for 7 years. Dad? What? What are you doing here, Dad? What? His mouth was moving, but his eyes were filling. Harold turned his head. He nodded toward the truck. Mom is in the truck, son. Nathan went down the porch steps 2 at a time in stocking feet, the coffee cup falling from his hand, brown stains spreading on the snow. He went past his father. He climbed up into the back of the Power Wagon. His mother was lying on the small bed under a wool blanket. Her face was the color of paper. Her eyes were closed. A man Nathan had never seen was sitting on a milk crate beside her, holding her wrist. The man looked up. He said, "Mr. Whitfield, we brought your mother home." Nathan fell to his knees at the side of the bed. "Mom." Eleanor opened her eyes. "Nathan." He was crying. He was 45 years old and he was crying like a boy. "Mom." "Hi, sweetheart." She lifted her hand. He took it. He pressed it to his face. His tears ran down over her fingers. "Mom, Mom, Mom. I came to see you, Nathan. I came to see Liam." "I know, Mom, I know. I am sorry, son. I am sorry for what we did, for what we said, for 7 years, for all of it." "Mom, no. Mom, listen." He swallowed. He pulled himself together. He looked back over his shoulder toward the cab and shouted, "Dad, Dad, come up here. Come up here right now." Harold climbed in. He sat down on the other side of the small bed. He took Eleanor's other hand. The three of them sat there for a long moment without speaking. Nathan put his forehead against his mother's hand. "Mom, there is something I have to tell you. Both of you. I have to tell you both. I should have called. I have been trying to figure out how to call. I have been a coward for too long." Eleanor blinked. "Tell us." "I got Dad's last letter." Harold went very still. "You got it. The November letter. It came 3 weeks ago. I had been pulling the others out of the mailbox and writing return to sender on them without opening them. For 7 years. Every month. Every single one. I never opened them. I never read one word of one of them. I was so angry. I was just so angry that I made it a thing I did and I could not stop. And I knew what I was doing. I knew. But 3 weeks ago, I came home from work and the new one was in the mailbox and I picked it up to throw it in the recycling like always, and something stopped me. I do not know what. I do not know. I held it in my hand and I looked at Dad's handwriting and I thought about how he used to write me notes when I was little in my lunch bag, and I sat down on the porch and I opened it. He could not speak for a moment. "I read it, Mom. I read what Dad wrote. About you, about the diagnosis, about the 3 months, and then about how it got worse and how it might be 3 weeks. About how he was going to drive you up here whether I wanted him to or not, because you had to see Liam before you." Before. He was sobbing now. He was a 45-year-old man on his knees and he was sobbing. "I bought a plane ticket. Mom, I bought a plane ticket. I was going to come down next Saturday. I had it on the kitchen counter. I was going to come and see you. I was going to bring Liam. I was going to apologize for everything. I was going to. And then the buzzer went off and the bikes were in the street and I looked out and I saw the truck and I saw Dad and I realized you came up here because you did not know I had read it. You drove up here in a December storm because you thought I was still throwing your letters away. Mom, I am so sorry." Eleanor was smiling. Her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. "You read it." "I read it." She closed her eyes and a tear ran down into her hair. "Then it was not for nothing," she said. "None of it was for nothing." Harold put his face in his hands. Bear and Deacon climbed quietly out of the back of the truck and closed the door behind them and stood in the street in the snow and gave them their family back. Outside, the little boy in the doorway watched it all. He was 4 years old and he did not understand most of it. He understood his daddy was crying. He understood the daddy had run out into the snow without shoes. He understood there were a lot of motorcycle men in his street and they were standing very quietly and they had their hats off. He pushed the door open the rest of the way. He came out onto the porch in his socks. He looked at the line of bikers in the street. He looked at the biggest one. He looked at Bear. Bear looked down at him. The little boy said, "Are you a giant?" Bear knelt slowly in the snow until he was eye level with the little boy on the porch. "No, son, I am not a giant, but you are big." "Yes, I am big." The little boy thought about this. "My grandma is in there." "That is right. Daddy says she is sick." "Yes." "Did you bring her here?" "Yes, son." The little boy looked at the row of bikes. He looked at Bear's face. He looked at Bear's beard. He reached out a small hand and patted Bear on the cheek very lightly, the way a child pats a horse on the nose. "You did a good job," the little boy said. Bear closed his eyes for a moment. "Thank you, son." He cleared his throat. "What is your name?" Liam Harold Whitfield. Bear opened his eyes. You are named after your grandpa's son. Yes. Did you know that? Yes, Daddy told me. The little boy looked toward the truck. Can I go see her? Yes, son, you can go see her. The little boy went down the porch steps in his socks. The snow was up to his shins. He did not seem to notice. He walked across the snow to the power wagon. Bear opened the door for him. The little boy climbed up. Eleanor turned her head. She saw him. For the rest of his life, Liam Whitfield would not be able to describe the look on his grandmother's face in that moment. He would say to people when he was a grown man, when he had children of his own, when his hair had gone gray and his hands had begun to look like his grandfather's, that the look on his grandmother's face when she saw him for the first time was the look he believed people had on their faces when they got to heaven. He would say it that exact way, and people would think he was exaggerating, and he would not argue with them, but he would know it was true. Eleanor lifted her hand. The little boy took it. Hello, my Liam, she said. Hello, Grandma, he said. She closed her eyes and she did not let go of his hand. Outside on the street, Bear straightened up. He looked at the men of his chapter. Brothers, I think we just got our reason. Nobody said anything. Snow continued to fall. After a while, a woman came out onto the porch from inside the house. She was in her late 30s, dark hair, kind eyes, wearing an apron over a sweater. She looked at the row of bikes in her street. She looked at the snow. She looked at the place where her husband had dropped his coffee. She looked at Bear, standing in the middle of all of it, and she said with the steady, practical voice of a woman whose mother-in-law had just arrived dying on her doorstep with 15 Hell's Angels in tow, Right then, all right, get her inside. Everybody, inside, I am putting on coffee. Her name was Caroline. Caroline. She had been married to Nathan for 9 years. She had spent every one of those years convinced her mother and father-in-law had abandoned her husband because that was what her husband had told her. She had spent the last 3 weeks since the letter slowly understanding that the truth was something different and more complicated and more short than any of them had told themselves. She had been the one to find Nathan crying on the porch with the letter in his hand. She had been the one to say, "Sweetheart, you have to go see her. You have to go now." She had been the one to buy the plane ticket. She held the door open. Bear lifted Eleanor out of the bed in the back of the power wagon. He carried her up the porch steps. Harold walked beside him with one hand on the back of Bear's arm and the other hand on Eleanor's. Carolyn stepped back to let them in. The little boy went in ahead of them and led the way to the living room, where there was a couch and a fire going. Bear set Eleanor down on the couch like she was made of porcelain. Caroline already had a blanket. She tucked it around Eleanor's legs. Eleanor looked up at her daughter-in-law. She had never met her. She had never been to her wedding. She had never seen her face except in a Facebook photo Harold had once shown her before they had stopped looking. "Hello," Eleanor said. "Hi," Caroline said. "Hi, Mom." Eleanor's eyes filled. Caroline knelt down next to her and took her hand and did not say anything else. She did not need to. Behind them in the doorway, 15 men in leather stood in the foyer with their hats in their hands. It was 4:11 on a Saturday afternoon in Silver Falls, Montana. The Whitfields were a family again for the first time in 7 years. The storm came in hard that night. It had been gathering all afternoon over the crazy mountains, a slow assembly of pressure and cold. By 6 o'clock, the wind was bending the spruce trees in the front yard sideways. By 7, the snow was coming in horizontal. By 8, the temperature had dropped to 16 below zero. By 9, the National Weather Service had upgraded it to a winter storm warning and then to a winter storm emergency. Travel was prohibited countywide. The pass was closed in both directions. Even the snowplow crews had been pulled off the highway. Inside the small blue house on Birch Avenue, 15 bikers and 4 family members, and a 4-year-old boy and a daughter-in-law settled in for what was going to be 3 days indoors together. There had been a brief conversation in the kitchen between Bear and Caroline about whether the chapter could find a motel in town. Caroline had looked at him as if he had said something profoundly stupid. "You drove my mother-in-law 95 miles through a blizzard," she said. "There is no motel in this country good enough for what you did. You will stay here. All of you. There is the basement, there is the garage with a wood stove, there is the upstairs office, and there is the back porch which is enclosed and has heat. We will figure it out. Nobody is going to a motel." Bear had looked at the kitchen. He had looked at Caroline. "Yes, ma'am," he had said. They figured it out. Riggs and Colt and Torquay took the basement, which had a futon and a recliner, and was carpeted. 6 others laid out sleeping bags in the garage with the wood stove going. 3 more set up in the upstairs office. Deacon claimed the back porch on his own, which suited him because he was a man who slept badly when he could hear other men breathing. Bear took the leather chair in the living room corner in earshot of Eleanor. Flint did not pick a spot. He went into the kitchen and asked Caroline if there was anything that needed doing. There was. There were 24 dirty mugs and a pot of stew to make for 16 hungry people. Flint rolled up his sleeves and started washing. Caroline stood at the stove stirring beef and onions in a pot the size of a wash basin. She glanced at Flint at the sink. "Are you the one with the cigarettes?" "What?" "My husband said the one washing the dishes is the one who keeps trying to leave, but does not actually leave." Flint laughed. It surprised him. He had not laughed properly in a while. "That is about right. What is your name?" "Flint Mercer." "That is a hard name." "It is the only one I have." She handed him a knife and a chopping board and a yellow onion. "Cut this, small." "Yes, ma'am." He cut the onion. In the next room, he could hear Eleanor's voice soft speaking to her grandson. He could hear Harold's deep, low laugh. "You are good at that," Caroline said of the onion. "I worked in a kitchen for 2 years." "When?" "I was 18, 19, after foster care, before everything else." "What happened to put you in foster care?" He stopped cutting. He looked at her. "You do not ask a small question, do you?" "I have been told that." He cut the onion for a while. "My mother left me at 6. She put me in the lobby of Sacred Heart Hospital in Spokane on a bench and told me to wait, and she did not come back. I have not seen her since. I do not know if she is alive. I am 32 years old. That has been most of my life." Caroline did not say anything for a few seconds. "That is the worst thing I have heard in a long time," she said. "Some people get it worse. Some people get it better. I am not asking about some people. I am asking about you." Flint did not answer. She turned back to her pot. "My mother was a drunk," she said. "She is sober now, 11 years. She did some bad things to me when I was a kid. I forgave her about 7 years ago. It was not because she earned it. It was because I needed to put it down so I could carry other things. That is all I will say." Flint cut. She said, "Flint, look at me." He looked up. "You are not going to find your mother in any old woman dying on any biker's couch. You are not going to find her in the work of helping somebody else's family. The kid in the lobby is not going to be unkidded. But you do get to be a man who would not put a kid on a bench. You do get to be the opposite of her. That is the only thing you get. You do not get to fix it. But the opposite of her is a real thing, and it is worth doing." He held the knife very still on the cutting board for a long moment. He said, "Thank you, ma'am." She said, "You are welcome." The stew was ready at 9:40. They served it in the living room because that was where everybody was. They ate off paper plates in their laps. Bear sat on the floor near Eleanor. Liam sat in Bear's lap, which Bear had not expected to happen, which had simply happened, the child climbing up like he had been doing it for years, and Bear settling him there like a man holding his own grandson. Harold sat on the couch with Eleanor's head against his shoulder. Nathan sat on the floor in front of his mother, with his back against the couch and his hand on her ankle, as if he was afraid she would float away. Eleanor ate 3 spoonfuls. She could not manage more. She did not complain. She watched the room. Sometime around 10:30, Liam fell asleep in Bear's lap. Carolyn came to take him. Bear lifted the small body and handed him over with the careful precision of a man handing over a piece of crystal. The little boy did not wake. He just turned his head against his mother's neck. Caroline carried him upstairs. In the quiet that followed, Eleanor turned her face toward Bear. "Son, come closer. I want to ask you something." Bear shifted up onto his knees beside the couch. "Yes, ma'am." "That letter you carry, the one in your pocket, the one your mother wrote you." Bear felt the blood leave his face. "Yes, ma'am." "You have not opened it. You have carried it for 15 years without opening it. Is that right?" He did not ask her how she knew. He did not know how she knew. He had not told her. He had not told anybody. The letter lived in the inside breast pocket of his leather vest, and it had not seen daylight since he had folded it and put it there in 2011. "Yes, ma'am." She did not say anything else. She just looked at him. She looked at him with the same look his mother used to give him when he was 8 years old, and he had broken something and not told her yet, but she already knew. Will you open it, Eleanor said. Will you open it tonight? Will you do me that thing? Bear could not answer. I am not your mother's son. I cannot make you. But I am a mother, and the women who have left this world know what we have left in our letters to our boys, and we know what it does to them not to read them. Bear looked at the floor. I know what is in it, ma'am. What is in it? That she forgave me. Maybe. That she said she loved me. Maybe. That she said she understood why I did not come home. Eleanor did not answer that one. She just kept looking at him. I have been carrying it for 15 years because the day I open it is the day she is really gone, Bear said. And the day she is really gone, I become a man who lost his mother and did not come home for her funeral. As long as the letter is closed, she is still writing it. Do you understand what I am saying? Eleanor closed her eyes. I understand, son. He thought he had won. He thought she would let it go. She opened her eyes. But Dominic, he looked at her. She has been writing it for 15 years, and she finished it. She finished it the day she sealed the envelope. She wrote what she wrote. She made her peace. You have not given her your half. You have not let her finish her work. You have been holding her hand on the edge of the world and refusing to let her cross because you are afraid of what comes next for you. But she is ready, son. She has been ready for 15 years. You are the one who is not ready. She did not say anything else. Bear's eyes were wet. He blinked. He did not let them fall. Yes, ma'am, he whispered. Eleanor closed her eyes again. Tonight, she said. Open it tonight. I would like to know before I go that you read it. I would like to be able to tell your mother that I helped. Yes, ma'am. She slept. Bear stayed on his knees beside the couch for a long time before he stood. He went outside onto the back porch. Deacon was there in a sleeping bag in the corner, snoring softly. Bear pulled a chair to the window. He sat. He took the envelope out of the inside pocket of his vest. He held it in his hands for a long time. The handwriting on the front said, "To my son Dominic. Read this when you can." He turned it over. The back was blank, except for the date in pencil. He thought of 1,000 things at once. He thought of his mother in the kitchen of the house in Macon, Georgia, where he had grown up frying bacon at 6 in the morning before school, her hair in a green kerchief. He thought of her at his high school graduation, sitting alone in the bleachers because his father was already gone. He thought of her crying at the door the day he shipped out for Iraq the first time. He thought of her face on the screen of his satellite phone when she had called him to tell him about the diagnosis. He thought of the call from his sister telling him she was gone. He thought of the long flight home that he should have taken and did not because the unit was in contact in Fallujah, and he had told himself that she would not have wanted him to leave the boys, which was true, which was also true, which was the most convenient kind of truth. He opened the envelope. There was one sheet of paper inside, her handwriting the careful school teacher cursive she had used all her life. He read, "My dear Dominic, I am writing this on a Tuesday afternoon in October. The hospice nurse has given me one of my good days. They tell me I do not have many more, but I do not believe them entirely because I have always been stubborn about these things, and I am writing as if I will see Christmas, which I may. I want you to know that I do not blame you for not coming home. I know that you cannot come home. The Army does not work that way, and your job does not work that way, and I knew when you signed up the third time that there were going to be moments like this one, and I made my peace with it on the day I drove you to the airport. So you do not need to spend any time blaming yourself, son. That is a tax I do not want you to pay. I want to tell you 3 things. The first thing is that I drove out to Wyoming last summer to see your clubhouse. I did not tell you. I did not want to make a scene. I had your sister look up the address on the internet. I drove out there on a Saturday in July. I parked across the street. I sat in the car. I watched you and your brothers work on a motorcycle in front of the open garage. You were teaching the young one with the beard how to pull a transmission. You had grease on your forehead, and you were laughing about something. I sat in the car for 45 minutes and I watched you. I did not get out. I did not say hello. I did not want to embarrass you in front of your boys, but I want you to know that I saw you. I saw who you have become. I saw the men who follow you. And I want to tell you, Dominic, that the man you have become is the man I always hoped you would be, not because of the leather or the patches, because of how you spoke to that young man. The way you put your hand on his shoulder and explained the part. The way you laughed when he got it wrong. That was your father's son. That was your father in you, and that was me in you, and that was the best of both of us. I drove home that night and I sat in the kitchen and I cried for an hour. They were good tears. The second thing is that I forgive you for the things you said the last time we talked on the phone. About me being a coward for letting the cancer be what it was. About me giving up. I know you did not mean it. I knew it then. I forgave you the next morning. I should have called and told you. I did not, and that is on me. So in case you have been carrying it, son, lay it down. It is gone. It has been gone for a long time. The third thing is the most important. I want to tell you what I want from you after I am gone. I want you to live. I want you to love a woman if you find one who can hold the weight of you. I want you to be a father if you find a way. I want you to ride hard, and I want you to take care of those boys in your club, every single one of them, because some of them have no mother. And you are the closest thing to one they are going to find in this life. I want you to forgive yourself. That is the hardest one, and that is the one I am asking the most. Forgive yourself, Dominic. Not because I tell you to, because it is the only way to honor what you came from. I did not raise you to carry me around forever. I raised you to put me down gently when the time came and to walk on. The walking on is the honoring. Do you hear me, son? The walking on is the honoring. I love you. Mom. P.S. There is a box of your grandfather's things in the attic of the house. Your sister knows. There is a wooden cross in it that he carried through the Pacific. It is yours. Wear it or give it away. Do not let it sit in a box. He would not have wanted that, and neither do I. Bear sat very still on the back porch of a small house in Silver Falls, Montana, with snow falling past the window behind him, and he read the letter twice and then a third time, and then he put his face in his hands and he wept. He wept without making any sound. He wept for 15 years. He wept for the airport. He wept for the satellite phone. He wept for the woman who had sat in a car across the street from his clubhouse for 45 minutes in July and not gotten out. He wept for the lie he had been telling himself about why he had not opened the letter. He wept for what she had asked of him, which was the only thing she had ever asked, and which was the hardest possible thing. After a long time, he stood up. He folded the letter. He put it back into the envelope. He put the envelope back into the breast pocket of his leather vest, where it would live for the rest of his life, but where it would live now in a different way. He walked back into the living room. Eleanor was awake. He had thought she would be asleep. She was not. He crossed the room to the couch. He knelt beside her. He took her hand. Ma'am, did you read it? I read it. What did it say? He smiled, which surprised him because he had not thought he was going to be able to smile. It said she came to Wyoming. What? She came to my clubhouse. The summer before she died. She drove out from Georgia. She sat in her car across the street and watched me for 45 minutes. She did not get out. She did not want to embarrass me. She just wanted to see who I had become. Eleanor closed her eyes. A tear rolled down her cheek. I told you, she whispered. You did, ma'am. I told you she could see you. You did. She squeezed his hand. Her grip was very weak, but it was real. Now you can tell her, she said. The next time you go to her stone, you can tell her you read it. You can tell her you are going to do what she asked. Yes, ma'am. Good. She slept. Bear stayed beside her the rest of the night. He did not sleep. He watched her breathing. He watched the snow fall past the window. He thought of his mother in a car in Wyoming in July with her hands on the steering wheel watching her son. He thought of 50 miles of road behind a green Chevy K10 that had carried a dying woman 95 miles in December. He thought of the words on the porch the day before. The kid in the lobby in Spokane was waiting for a hand on his shoulder. He had said that to Flint and meant it. He had not until this moment realized it had been true for him too. The 45 minutes in the parking lot in Wyoming had been his mother's hand on his shoulder. He just had not been able to see it for 15 years because he had not been ready to look. He was ready now. He sat by Eleanor Whitfield's couch as Saturday became Sunday, and he kept watch, and he was very quiet, and the storm outside did what storms do in Montana in December, which is whatever it wants. Sunday morning came up gray. The wind had eased some in the small hours, but the snow had kept falling, and there were drifts up to the porch rail that had not been there the night before. Carolyn came downstairs at 6. Bear was still in the leather chair beside Eleanor's couch. He had not slept. She looked at him for a moment without saying anything. Then she went into the kitchen and made a pot of coffee and brought him a mug. "You did not sleep," she said. "No, ma'am. You should." "I will, after breakfast." "How is she?" Bear looked at Eleanor. Her chest rose and fell, slow, even. Her face was peaceful. "She is here," he said. "She is having a good night." Carolyn knelt down beside the couch and pressed her wrist gently against Eleanor's forehead, the way mothers do. "She does not feel feverish," she said. "No, ma'am." Caroline straightened. "Has she been awake?" "Off and on." "What did she talk about?" Bear smiled a little. He sipped the coffee. "She talked about a third-grade student named Tommy Lawler, who could not read in October and could read in May. She told me what color the curtains were in the first house she and Harold lived in. She told me she always wanted a daughter, and she got one in you, and it took her 12 years to figure out how grateful she was for that, and she was sorry she did not figure it out sooner." Caroline's hand went to her mouth. "She said that." "She said it about 3 in the morning. She was very clear when she said it. I wrote it down because I thought you should have it later when you needed it." Bear reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He had written it down in pencil on a piece of an old grocery receipt because that was what was in his pocket. He handed it to Caroline. Caroline read it standing in her own living room with her bare feet on the coal floor and her bathrobe loose around her shoulders, and she covered her face with one hand, and she stood like that for almost a minute before she could speak. "Thank you," she said when she could. "Yes, ma'am." She put the piece of paper in the pocket of her robe, and she went into the kitchen and started breakfast for 16 people. The men woke up in waves. The basement crew came up first, Torque cracking his back at the top of the stairs. The garage crew came in through the back door, bringing in cold and wood smoke. Deacon came up from the back porch with his hair sticking out at angles. Flint was already up. He was helping Carolyn. He had become in the way a hard-hearted man does sometimes when he is given a job by a kind woman very quietly indispensable in her kitchen. Liam came down the stairs in pajamas with rocket ships on them. He went straight to the couch and climbed up next to his grandmother without asking. He laid his head on her chest. Eleanor opened her eyes. She put her hand on his back. "Hi, baby." "Hi, Grandma." "I had a dream about you," she said. "What was the dream?" "I dreamed you were sitting on a porch with me. It was summer. There were flowers. There was a day. We were eating pie." "What kind of pie?" "Strawberry rhubarb." "I have never had strawberry rhubarb pie." "You will, baby. Someday you will. And when you do, you remember I told you about it. You remember your grandma told you it was the best pie in the world. Will you remember?" "I will remember, Grandma." "Good boy." Harold came in from the upstairs office where he had slept on a folded camping mat with 3 of the bikers. He looked rested for the first time in months. He looked at his wife and his grandson on the couch, and he stood for a moment and just looked, and then he walked over and sat down on the floor at her feet like a young man on the floor of his mother's house on Christmas morning, and he put his hand on her ankle. Nathan came down. He took the chair Bear had been in. Bear had wandered off to the kitchen for more coffee. Nathan looked at his mother and his son and his father in his living room, and he could not believe it was real. Breakfast was eggs and bacon and toast and grits made by Flint and Caroline in shifts at a small 4-burner stove that should not have been able to feed 16 people but did. They ate in the living room because the dining room could not hold everybody. They ate off paper plates. Liam fed his grandmother small bites of toast with butter. She ate 3 of them. It was the most food she had taken in a single sitting in 4 days. After breakfast, the storm came back. By noon, the National Weather Service had upgraded again. By 2 in the afternoon, the wind was hitting 80 miles an hour at the tops of the ridges and 40 miles an hour in town. Power flickered 3 times. The lights in the house dimmed and came back. Caroline went to the basement and brought up candles and matches and set them on the mantel in case. Bear did not let the men get bored. He set Riggs to clearing the driveway with the shovel from the garage. He set Colt and Torque to chopping kindling. He set Deacon to teaching Liam how to play 5-card draw with a deck of cards Liam had pulled from a kitchen drawer. He set Flint to keeping the wood stove fed. He himself walked from room to room, checking on people the way he had walked from cot to cot in the field hospitals 15 years before, and the rhythm of it settled him. In the early afternoon, Eleanor asked to see Bear alone. He came in and pulled the chair close. Liam had gone upstairs for his nap. Harold had gone with him because Harold had not slept properly in 3 days. Nathan and Caroline were in the kitchen with the door closed. Bear was the only one in the room with her. Son, reach under the couch, under the cushion. There is a small wooden box. Bring it to me. He looked. The box was tucked under the edge of the couch where it could not be seen unless you were looking. It was the size of a pack of cigarettes. The wood was dark with age. There was a small brass hinge. There was a small brass latch. He brought it to her. She did not open it. She held it in her 2 hands and she looked at it. This box belonged to my father, she said. My father was a Marine. He landed at Saipan in 1944. He was 19 years old. He carried this box and what is in it from Saipan through Iwo Jima and home to Wyoming, and he carried it the rest of his life. He gave it to me when he was dying in 1991. He told me to give it to somebody who needed it more than I did. She handed it to Bear. Open it. Bear opened the box. Inside on a piece of folded blue felt was a small wooden cross, 3 inches long, 2 inches wide. It had been carved by hand. The wood was a dark heart pine polished by decades of handling, almost black in places where a thumb had rubbed it. There was a small chip out of the bottom of the long stroke. The chip had been there a long time. There was a leather thong threaded through a small hole at the top. I am giving it to you, she said. Ma'am, I am giving it to you. My father carried this through 3 battles. My grandfather carved it. My mother kept it in her hand while she gave birth to me. My father gave it to me on his deathbed. I have carried it in my pocket every day for 34 years. I would have given it to Nathan, but Nathan is not the man who needs to be carrying it. You are. Bear opened his mouth. She lifted her hand to stop him. Listen to me, son. Your mother told you in her letter to wear your grandfather's cross or to give it away. Did she not? She did. I am asking you to put my father's cross around your neck, and I am asking you to give your grandfather's cross to your sister or to your sister's son or to anybody in your family who would carry it. I want you to wear a cross that came from another family's son. Because the lesson is that family is not just blood. Family is what we choose. Family is who we ride for in a snowstorm. Family is the woman who reads to a boy who cannot read until he can. Family is the man who carries his wife to a stranger's door. Family is the stranger who opens the door. Do you understand me, Dominic? He could not speak. I want you to wear it because every time you touch it, you are going to remember what we did together this week. You are going to remember an old woman from Wyoming and her old husband and her son and her grandson, and you are going to remember that you got us home. You are going to remember the work. And on the days you forget who you are, son, you are going to put your hand on this little piece of wood, and it is going to remind you. Do you hear me? Yes, ma'am. Put it on. He lifted it out of the box with hands that shook. He slipped the leather thong over his head. The cross settled against his sternum on top of his shirt under his vest. It was warm from her hand. She looked at him. There, she said, now you are mine too. She closed her eyes. Bear sat with the wooden cross against his chest and his hand wrapped around it, and he wept for the second time in 12 hours, which was twice more than he had wept in the previous 15 years. The storm went on through the night. On Monday morning, the wind had finally died. The snow had stopped. The sky had gone a hard, cold blue, the kind of blue that does not promise warmth, only clarity. The drifts in the yard were chest-high in places. The driveway was buried. Eleanor did not wake up at her usual time. When she did wake up around 10, she was different. Bear noticed it first. He had been watching her too closely not to. Her eyes did not focus quite the way they had the day before. Her speech was slower. Her left hand twitched periodically, small, involuntary motions that she did not seem to be aware of. Her color was wrong. She was a little bit blue around the edges of her lips, even though she was warm and the room was warm. He pulled Harold aside in the hallway. Sir, it is getting close. Harold nodded. He had known. How long? Bear shook his head. Not long, today, tomorrow. I would not say longer. Harold closed his eyes for a moment. He breathed in. He breathed out. All right, he said. All right. He went back to her side. The day went slowly. The bikers stayed close. They moved quietly through the house. Flint kept the stove going. Riggs and Caleb's prospect brother shoveled the driveway and the walk so that an ambulance, if one became necessary, would be able to reach the front door. Torque sat at the kitchen table with the morning paper open in front of him, not reading. Deacon sat on the floor with Liam and built a tower out of wooden blocks. Bear stayed with Eleanor. Eleanor talked a great deal that day. She would speak in long, quiet sentences and then drift and then come back. She told Caroline about a dress she had worn to a Christmas dance in 1966. She told Nathan she had been wrong about his divorce. She had been wrong about Sarah. She had been wrong to take Sarah's side. She had been wrong to refuse to listen to him when he tried to tell her what Sarah had done. She was sorry. She was sorry. She was sorry for 7 years of silence and for every letter she had let Harold send and not sent one of her own. Nathan held her hand and said, "Mom, I forgive you." He said it 12 times because she could not always remember she had been forgiven. Around 4 in the afternoon, Eleanor asked for Liam. The little boy climbed up onto the couch. She put her arm around him. "Baby." "Yes, Grandma. You are going to have a long life. You are going to grow up tall like your grandpa. You are going to fall in love with somebody who is good to you. You are going to have a job that makes you proud. Will you do that for me?" "Yes, Grandma." "Promise me. Promise. I want to tell you one more thing. Will you remember?" "I will remember. Be kind, baby. To everybody, even the people who are mean, especially them. Be kind. The world has enough other people in it. You be the kind one. Will you do that for Grandma?" "Yes, Grandma." "Promise." "Promise." She kissed the top of his head. He laid against her side for a long time. Eventually, he fell asleep there. Caroline came in and lifted him off her gently. He did not wake. Caroline took him upstairs. Eleanor's eyes followed her. Caroline came back down. Eleanor reached out a hand. "Daughter." "Yes, Mom." "Sit with me." Caroline sat. Eleanor's eyes closed and stayed closed for almost a minute. Caroline thought she had fallen asleep. Then she opened her eyes and said, "You saved my son." Caroline blinked. "What?" "Nathan. When you came along, he was bad off after Sarah. He was bad off after we did what we did. He was about to disappear into something. I could feel it from 1,000 miles away. And then you came along. You gave him this house and this child and this life. You did what his mother had unmade. You put him back together." She had to stop for breath. "You did not have to do any of that. You could have walked away. You did not." Caroline was crying. She had not realized she was crying. "I love him," she said. "I know you do." Caroline put her face down against Eleanor's hand. Eleanor stroked her hair. "Thank you, daughter," she said. The afternoon faded into evening. The bikers ate stew again. Eleanor did not eat. She slept most of the time now, surfacing for minutes here and there to say a thing to somebody, and then sliding back under. The room had gone quiet around her. They had figured out the way families do that this was a vigil now, and you were not supposed to talk over the dying. At 9 in the evening, Eleanor opened her eyes and said, "Harry." He was already there. He had not left her side in hours. His hand was in hers. "Yes, love. I am tired." "I know, love. I think I am going to go a little before morning." He did not argue with her. He had known her too long to argue with her about things she knew. "All right, love. I want all of them in here." "All right." Caroline went and got Bear. Bear walked through the house and rounded everybody up quietly without raising his voice the way he had done so many things in his life. The 15 men of the Iron Wolves chapter came in from the garage, in the basement, in the back porch, in the upstairs office, and they filed into the living room in their stocking feet, and they stood along the walls and at the foot of the couch and behind the chairs, and they took off their hats. Liam was asleep upstairs. Caroline asked Eleanor if she wanted Liam. "No," Eleanor said. "Let him sleep, daughter. He has had his grandma. He has more than he knows. Let him sleep." Caroline nodded. Eleanor looked at the room. "Boys," she said, "come closer. I cannot say it loud." Bear knelt by the couch. The others moved in close. They were a wall of leather and beards and quiet around the small woman on the couch. She looked at them one by one. Her eyes were tired, but they were lucid. "Bear," she said. "Yes, ma'am. You were a son to me this week. Better than I deserved." He could not speak. "Flint," she said. "Yes, ma'am. You did the hardest work. With the rocks. I saw your hands. I knew what it cost you. You did the hardest work because you wanted the hardest work, and that is a thing about a man. Yes, ma'am. Deacon. Yes, ma'am. You came to my husband and you sat with him. When I was sick, when I could not. You were kind. Your wife is proud of you. Deacon nodded without speaking. She looked at the rest of them. I do not know all your names. I am sorry. Forgive me. I want you to know that I see you. Everyone. I see you boys. I see your faces. I will carry them with me. She turned her face toward Harold. Harry. Yes, love. I am going to close my eyes now. He squeezed her hand. All right, love. Tell Nathan I am proud of him. He is right here, love. You can tell him. Nathan was on her other side. He took her other hand. Mom, I am here. Nathan, I am so proud of you, son. I am so proud of you. Be kind to her. Be kind to him. Live a long time. Live a long time. I will, Mom. She turned back to Harold. I will see you on the porch. The one in Cody. The yellow one. I will be waiting on the porch. He could not answer. She closed her eyes. She did not open them again. Her breathing went slow. It went slower. It came in long, far apart, soft pulls. After a while, there was a long pause and then one more breath. After that, there was a long pause and there was not another one. The clock on the wall said 10:47. Harold put his face down against her hand and he wept without sound. Nathan did the same on the other side. Carolyn put her hands on Nathan's shoulders. Bear knelt on the floor by the couch and did not move. The 15 men of the Iron Wolves chapter stood with their hats in their hands, and they did not speak. After a long time, Bear stood up. He pressed 2 fingers against her neck and held them there, and counted in his head, and then he let his hand drop. Brothers, he cleared his throat. Eleanor Whitfield passed at 10:47 on December the 8th. Note the time. Riggs wrote it in a small notebook he carried. He always wrote it. He had been the one to write it for 2 brothers killed on a ride in 2014 and 1 brother lost to a heart attack in his sleep in 2017, and an aunt of Colt's whose funeral they had ridden, and Sarah Patterson. He wrote the date, he wrote the time, he wrote the name. The men filed out of the room one at a time. They each stopped on the way out and put a hand on Harold's shoulder, or on Nathan's, and they said something low, or they said nothing at all, and then they walked out and they left the family in the room together. Bear was the last to leave. He stopped at the door. He looked back. Harold's face was on his wife's chest. Nathan's was on her hand. Carolyn had her arms around her husband. He closed the door softly. He walked into the kitchen. The men of his chapter were already there, every one of them standing in a loose circle. They looked up when he came in. He looked at them. He said, "Brothers, we did the work." Nobody answered. Nobody had to. Flint said quietly, "What now?" Bear looked out the kitchen window. The yard was deep snow under a sky full of stars. The cold had cleared everything. Now, he said, we get her family through a funeral, then we ride home. The funeral was on Thursday. Silver Falls had a small Methodist church on the corner of 2nd and Cedar. White clapboard, a bell in the steeple, stained glass windows that the pastor had bought used from a closed parish in Helena in 1972. The sanctuary held about 200 people. On Thursday, it was full. Eleanor had been in Silver Falls for less than a week. She had been a stranger in the town. She had never set foot in the church. She did not know one of the people in the pews. But word had moved through the town the way word moves in small Montana places where everybody knows everybody else's grandfather. There was an old woman who had come up from Wyoming to die in her son's house. 15 bikers had brought her through a closed pass in a blizzard. The bikers had stayed for the funeral. They were not leaving until she was in the ground. People came, not because they had known her, because they had heard. Because in a country town in December, there are not many things that bring people out of their houses, but a thing like that one brings people out. The pastor was a woman in her late 40s named Reverend Karen Hollis. She had a kind face and a strong voice, and she spoke for 10 minutes about Eleanor Whitfield, a woman she had never met based on the notes Nathan and Harold had given her, and she did not pretend to have known the woman, and she did not embarrass herself by trying. She read from 1 Corinthians. She read from Psalm 23. She read a poem by Mary Oliver that Caroline had picked out. When it was Harold's turn to speak, he stood up slowly. He walked to the front. He took the small lectern with both hands. He looked out at the church. He did not cry. He had decided he would not cry through this part. He had decided his wife would have his words clearly, and he would cry later on his own time. So he stood at that lectern, and he held it, and he did not cry. He said, "I met Eleanor Belmont at a church social in 1967. She walked up to me, and she asked me to dance. I had just come back from Korea, and I did not know what to say to women, but I knew enough to say yes when this one asked me because I had eyes in my head, and I could see that she was the most beautiful thing I had ever looked at. We danced 4 songs that night. I asked her if I could see her again. She said yes before I finished the question. That was a habit she had with me of saying yes before I finished the question, and I came to love it." He looked at his son. "We had a boy. Nathan was born in 1974. He grew into an easy boy and then a difficult teenager and then a fine man. We were proud of him every step of the way, even when we did not show it well, which was often. I want my son to know that. I am saying it from this pulpit, so he will not be able to argue with me about it." He paused. "We made mistakes, Eleanor and I. We made big ones. We took the wrong side in a fight where there should have been no sides. We did not believe our boy when he told us the truth about somebody we should not have trusted. We spent 7 years not picking up a telephone. 7 years that I would burn the rest of my life to have back. And then my wife got sick, and the clock that I did not know was running ran out." He stopped. He breathed. "I want to thank some people now." He turned and he looked at the back of the church. The Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club of Wyoming Belt Creek came out of the back of the church and stood. 15 men in their finest leather with their patches on. They had cleaned up. They had cut their beards. Flint had even put on a tie, which had taken Caroline 20 minutes to explain to him how to do. Harold pointed to them. "These men," he said, "found my wife and me freezing on their doorstep on a Friday night last week. They had no reason to take us in. They had no reason to care. They had no reason to ride 95 miles through a blizzard for 2 strangers. They did all of those things anyway. They saved my wife twice on the road. Once when her heart got bad, once when her heart stopped. They got her here. They got her to her son and to her grandson. They gave Eleanor the last 7 days of her life with the family she had been missing for 7 years. I cannot pay them what I owe them. I will be in their debt until I die. I will be in their debt past that if there is anything past that, which I am beginning to think there is." He turned back to the congregation. "I want to say one more thing. Eleanor told me on the road on the 2nd hour of the ride up here, before her heart went the first time she said, 'Harry, the men on the bikes around us, those are angels.' She said it like a joke. She said it because she was embarrassed to say something serious. But she meant it. And I am here to tell you she was right. They are. They were. They are sitting at the back of this church. They have grease under their fingernails and tattoos on their arms and patches on their vests that some of you do not approve of, and they are angels. Every one of them." He paused. "I will miss my wife every day. I will miss her until I see her on a porch in Cody, Wyoming, in the yellow house with the green apron the way she said. I do not know when that will be. I am in no hurry, but it will come. And when it does, I will tell her about today. And she will already know." He sat down. The whole church was silent. Then Bear stood up at the back. He walked up the center aisle. He stopped at the front of the church and he turned to face the congregation. He had something in his hand, a long object wrapped in a cloth. The men of the chapter had carried it in earlier in the 2 separate parts and assembled it in the vestibule before the service. He unfolded the cloth. It was 15 small wooden crosses, each about 3 inches by 2, each carved by hand. Torque had carved them all. He had done it Tuesday and Wednesday at Nathan's kitchen table with a single knife and a piece of an old red oak fence post that Nathan had been planning to throw out. He had carved 15 of them. The chips were piled on a newspaper. Nathan had watched him do it for 2 days and had not said a word. Bear lifted one and held it up. "Brothers," he said, "and family, the Iron Wolves of Belt Creek offer to present these. One for Eleanor Whitfield to go in her hand in the casket, one for Harold Whitfield, one for Nathan and Caroline and the boy, 11 for our chapter to keep one on every bike that came up. Each of us will tie it to our handlebars. We will carry her with us for the rest of our riding lives." He set the crosses down on the small table at the front of the church. He looked at the room. "Eleanor told me the night before she died that family is not just blood. Family is what we choose. Family is the strangers who open the door. We chose Eleanor. Eleanor chose us. We are family now. The chapter and the Whitfields. For good. I will tell you here in front of God and these witnesses that the Whitfields are blood to the Iron Wolves of Belt Creek from this day forward. If any of you, Harold, Nathan, Carolyn, Liam, ever need us, you call and we ride. That is the promise. That is what she made us promise. That is what we are. He sat down. The Reverend Hollis stepped back up. She had been crying. She did not try to hide it. She said the service will conclude with one final piece. Mr. Whitfield has selected the recessional music. He has requested that we as a congregation exit the church first and then the casket and the family. He has asked that the recessional be performed outside the church. Please follow me out and you will see what he has arranged. The congregation filed out into the cold, bright morning. The bikers had pre-positioned themselves. While Harold had been giving his eulogy, 3 of the prospects from a sister chapter who had ridden up Tuesday had moved 15 Harleys into a long row down both sides of the church walk. The bikes were not running yet. They were just lined up kickstands down Chrome in the sun and honor guard. As the casket came out, carried by Bear and Flint and Torque and Deacon and Riggs and Nathan, 15 engines came up to a roar at the same instant. The casket was carried down the walk between the 2 rows of idling bikes. Harold walked behind it with Caroline on his arm and Liam on his other side. The boy was holding his grandfather's hand. He was wearing a small black coat and his hair had been combed. He did not understand all of it, but he understood his grandmother was in the box. He had been told. He had said, "Will I see her again?" Harold had said, "Yes, baby. Maybe not in this life, but yes." The casket reached the hearse. The bikes shut off all at once. There was a single bagpipe. Nobody had told anybody that Colt Jennings, the young Viking biker, the prospect with the beard, had been playing the bagpipe since he was 8 years old. Colt had grown up in a Scottish-American family in Butte, and his grandfather had taught him, and he had not played for anyone outside his family ever until that morning. He stood at the back of the row of bikes in full ceremonial dress, a kilt under his leather, and he played Amazing Grace. He played it slow, and he played it well. He had been practicing every night for 3 days in the garage when nobody was around. His hands shook on the first verse. They did not shake on the second. The casket went into the hearse. The bagpipe finished. A long, deep silence. Then Bear, at the head of the line, brought his hand up to a salute. He had not saluted in 15 years since the day he left the service. The 15 men of the chapter saluted with him. Harold returned the salute slow and tired and old and steady. The corporal of the 2nd Infantry Division returning the salute of 15 Iron Wolves of Belt Creek chapter on a Thursday in December in a small town in Montana. The hearse rolled out. The bikers fell in behind it. The procession went 4 blocks to the cemetery. Bear led with 8 bikes ahead of the hearse, 7 bikes behind. The cars came after. The town was quiet. Curtains moved in windows. An old man on his porch put his hand over his heart. At the grave, Reverend Hollis read the committal. The casket was lowered slowly into the ground. The wooden cross Bear had picked out went into the grave with Eleanor in her hand. The grave was filled by the bikers. They had asked for the shovels. They had insisted. They did the work. They were sweating in their leathers by the end. When it was done, Harold stood at the head of the grave for a long time without speaking. Then he said in a low voice, "See you in Cody, love." He turned away. The chapter rode home on Friday morning. Bear left first. Harold and Nathan and Caroline and Liam came out onto the porch in coats. Snow was still on the ground, but the wind was gone, and the sky was the kind of pale blue that Montana gets on its kinder days. Bear came up to Harold. The 2 of them embraced. Harold's face went into the leather of Bear's vest. "You take care of yourself," son Harold said. "You too, sir. You come down to Cody sometime. There is a chair on my porch with your name on it." "I will, sir. I promise." Bear knelt down in front of Liam. "Hey, little man." "Hey, Bear. You remember me all right?" "Yes. What is the rule Grandma gave you?" "Be kind. Even to the mean ones, especially them." "That is right. Good man." He stood up. He hugged Carolyn. She held him a long second. "Thank you," she whispered. "You are welcome, ma'am." He shook Nathan's hand and clapped him on the shoulder, and they did not need to say anything to each other. He swung onto his bike. Behind him, 14 others did the same. The chapter rolled out of Birch Avenue, past the maple trees, past the little church with the wooden cross out front, past the Sinclair and the feed store, and the Wells Fargo and the barber shop, and out onto Highway 89 going south. 15 Harleys, 15 small carved oak crosses tied to 15 handlebars, the morning sun ahead of them, and the long road home. Harold stood on the porch and watched them go. He stood until he could not hear them anymore. Then he stood a little longer. Caroline came up beside him with a coat over her shoulders. "Dad, come inside, it is cold." In a minute, daughter. She did not argue, she went back in. Harold stood on the porch alone. He looked up at the sky. "You see them, love," he said. The sky did not answer. The sky did not have to, he knew. He went inside. 2 years passed. Harold Whitfield stayed in Silver Falls for the rest of his life. Nathan and Caroline insisted. There was an addition put on the back of the house, a small one-bedroom suite with its own bath and its own porch and its own wood stove, and Harold moved into it in the spring after Eleanor died. He took to it the way an old man takes to a thing his children have done for him, which is with the gruff complaints that are a form of gratitude. He told Caroline 3 times the first month that she had wasted her money. He told her the 3rd time she should not have done it. She did not argue. She just brought him another cup of coffee. Harold and Liam were inseparable for 2 years. The boy was 4, turning 5, turning 6. He went to kindergarten that fall after Eleanor died. He came home every afternoon and walked straight back to his grandfather's porch and reported on the day. Harold listened. He sometimes told Liam stories about Korea that were probably not suitable for a 5-year-old. Caroline did not mind. She figured a boy could learn worse things in the world than what an old corporal had to say. Harold and Bear stayed in touch. They wrote letters. Harold had begun to do that after 7 years of being the man writing letters that came back, and after the 84 envelopes in the cardboard box that Nathan had finally read in stages over the year that followed his mother's death, weeping at his kitchen table at night while Caroline rubbed his back. Harold wrote 1 letter a month to Bear. Bear wrote back. Sometimes the letters were a single page. Sometimes they were 6 pages. In November of the 2nd year, Harold's heart began to give up. He had been having a bad few weeks. He had told no one. He had not wanted to make a fuss. But Liam had noticed first. The boy was 6.5 by then and was sharper than any of the adults gave him credit for. He told his mother, "Grandpa is not breathing right. Grandpa is breathing wrong." Carolyn had taken Harold to the doctor on a Tuesday in mid-November. The doctor had listened. The doctor had said congestive heart failure advanced. The doctor had said weeks to a few months, depending. Harold had said, "Do not put me in a hospital." Caroline had said, "No, Dad, you will stay home." He did. He stayed in his suite. Nathan took family leave. Carolyn cooked. Liam read to him from kindergarten books. The hospice nurse came twice a week. In the 2nd week of December, Harold called Nathan into his room. "Son, I want you to call Bear." "I will, Dad." "Tell him I am going soon. Tell him I would like to see him before I go." "I will tell him." "Tell the boys to come, if they can. Tell the boys I would like to see them all." "I will tell them." Bear got the call on a Saturday afternoon. He hung up the phone. He walked into the main room of the clubhouse, the same room where he had carried Eleanor through the door 2 years before. He looked at the men of the chapter. "Brothers, Harry Whitfield is going. He wants us to come up. Who is in?" Every hand in the room came up. They rode out at 6 the next morning. It was December. There was snow. There was wind. There was no storm this time. No rock slide, no closed pass, no deputy on the highway, no near miss with a dying woman in the back of the chase truck. There was just a long, cold ride through familiar country with familiar friends. They made it in 7 hours. They came up Birch Avenue at 3 in the afternoon. The 15 bikes pulled into the front yard of the small blue house and parked. Caroline was on the porch. She had Liam beside her. The boy was almost 7 now. He waved. Bear came up the steps slowly. "How is he, ma'am?" "He is tired. He has been waiting." Bear nodded. He took off his vest in the foyer, the way a man does when he is going into a room of a dying friend. He went down the hallway. He pushed open the door to the suite. Harold was in the bed by the window. He had gotten very thin. His hair was wispy white. He turned his head when Bear came in. His eyes were the same. They were tired, but they were clear. "Bear." "Mr. Whitfield." "Harry. Harry." Bear came over and sat in the chair by the bed. "The boy's downstairs." Yes, sir, all 15 of them. Harold smiled. The smile was an effort. Tell them I said thank you for coming. I will, sir. Bear. Yes, sir. She is on the porch in Cody waiting for me. The yellow house. Just like she said. I believe she is, sir. I am going to go to her in the next day or two. I have been wanting to. I have been ready a while. Yes, sir. Will you do something for me? Anything, sir. Will you bring the boys upstairs? One at a time. I want to thank each one of them. I do not have much voice. 2 minutes apiece. Then they can go downstairs and have a beer or whatever they want. But I want to thank each one. I want them to remember I thank them. Yes, sir. Bring Liam in too, before the others. I want him with me. Yes, sir. Bear stood. He went out. For the next 3 hours, 15 men of the Iron Wolves chapter came up the stairs one by one and spent 2 minutes with Harold Whitfield. They went in and they sat in the chair and they took his hand and he said the same thing to each of them in slightly different words. He said, "You brought my wife to her grandson. You gave me the last week of her life. You will be in my heart for the rest of mine and after. Thank you, son. Thank you." Each of them came out and went downstairs to the kitchen and stood there and stared at the floor and did not speak for a few minutes. Caroline brought them coffee. Flint went up last. He sat in the chair. Harold looked at him. "Flint," he said, "Mr. Whitfield, you were ready to go back to Wyoming alone. That morning, 2 years ago, out by the propane cage. How do you know that?" "Deacon told me later. He tells me things." "Yes, sir. But you stayed." "I stayed." "Why?" Flint thought about it. He had thought about it many times. "Because Deacon told me my mother was not coming back, sir. He told me. And he was right. And then he told me I could be the kind of man who would not put a kid on a bench. And I had not thought about it that way before." "Are you that kind of man now?" "I try to be, sir." "That is enough." "Yes, sir. You found yourself, son. On the road that day, I saw it. We all saw it." Flint nodded. Harold's hand tightened on his very weakly. "Live a long time, Flint. Be useful. Have at least one good love. Have a child if you can. You would be a good father, son. I knew it the moment I watched you dig those rocks with your bare hands." Flint could not speak. He put his head down. After a moment, he stood up and walked out of the room. Carolyn did not say anything to him as he went past. She had learned in 2 years how to let a grown man cry in her hallway without making him feel watched. Harold Whitfield died at 6:27 on a Tuesday morning in December 2 years, and 4 days after his wife in his suite in his son's house in Silver Falls, Montana, with his hand in his grandson's hand, and his son holding the other, and his daughter-in-law in the chair by the window, and the 15 men of the Iron Wolves chapter of Belt Creek standing in the hallway with their hats off. His last words were to Liam. He said, "See you, partner." The boy said, "See you, Grandpa." The funeral was on the following Saturday. Same church, same Reverend Hollis, same bagpipe, same 15 bikes lined up down the walk, same town turning out to watch. The Iron Wolves filled the grave the same way they had filled Eleanor's. The chapter tied 15 more wooden crosses to 15 handlebars. They had not asked Torque to carve them. Torque had simply done it. He had been making them 2 a year since Eleanor's funeral. He had a small bag of them in the saddlebag on his bike at all times now. The chapter rode home that Sunday morning. A month later, in late January, the chapter started what they called the Eleanor Ride. Once a month, 2 days out of the Belt Creek clubhouse to a different small town picked the week before. The point was to find one family in that town that needed something done. Not money, something done, a wheelchair ramp built, a garage cleaned out, an old couple driven to see a relative. The Eleanor Ride did not ask for thanks. It did the work and rode home. By the 5th year, there were Eleanor Rides happening across 6 western states. All of them organized through a small website Caroline Whitfield ran from her kitchen table. She did not take a salary. She would not take donations. She would only accept volunteer hours. When pushed, she would say, "My mother-in-law was a 3rd-grade teacher who taught a boy named Tommy Lawler to read. I am not in this for money." 5 years after Eleanor's death, Bear Garrison rode alone to Macon, Georgia. He had been meaning to do it for 15 years and then for 20. He took the long way. He rode through Tennessee. He stopped in a small town in the foothills and ate biscuits at a diner. He pulled into the cemetery in Macon on a Thursday morning in May. His mother's stone was where he had left it. Beth Garrison, Beloved mother and wife, 1947 to 2010. He knelt in the grass. He pulled the cross out from under his shirt, the wooden one, the one Eleanor had given him. Heart pine polished black with 2 decades of one man's thumb on it. The leather thong was worn now. He had needed to retie it 3 times. He held it in his palm. He said, "Mom, I read it." He waited. He said, "I did not read it for 15 years. Then I read it. There was an old woman in Wyoming who made me read it. Her name was Eleanor Whitfield. She is the one who gave me this cross. She told me to tell you when I got down here." He breathed. "She wants you to know your son is a good man. She wants you to know her father's cross is hanging from my neck, and that the men I ride with would die for me and that I would die for them. She wants you to know that the work she asked you to do is being done, that a 15-man chapter of bikers in Wyoming does an Eleanor ride every month, and we will do it until we are dead, and our boys after us are doing it. She wants you to know I am useful, Mom. I am useful, and I have brothers, and I have a small family of one old man and one woman and one little boy that I would walk through fire for, and they are my family now too. She wants you to know all of that. She said she would be at the porch and she would see you on the porch." The yellow one in Cody, she said, "Tell your mother she will see her there." The wind in the cemetery was very gentle. The new grass was just up. The sun was warm. He said, "Mom, you came to Wyoming. You sat in the car. You watched me. I know. I know you did. I am sorry I did not come out. I am sorry I did not turn around. I am sorry I did not see your car. If you do this again, if you come back, if you can, I am asking you to honk this time. Honk just once. So I will look, and I will come out." He sat for a while. The wind moved the new grass. Bear Garrison, 48 years old, president of the Bell Creek chapter of the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club, combat medic of the 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, recovered son of Beth Garrison of Macon, Georgia, put his hand on the stone the way he had not been able to put it on her hand 15 years before, and he held it there for a long time. He said, "Mom, I love you." He said, "Mom, I am sorry." He said, "Mom, I am all right now. I just wanted you to know." He stood up. He looked at the long row of stones. He looked at the May sun on the Georgia grass. He thought of an old woman on a couch in Silver Falls who had told him, "A son, the women who have left this world know what we have left in our letters to our boys." He thought of an old man on a porch in Silver Falls who had told him, "You come down to Cody's, sometime there is a chair with your name on it." He thought of Caroline in her kitchen. He thought of Liam, who would be 9 now, who wrote him letters in pencil on lined paper that he kept in a folder in his desk. He thought of Flint, who had been the man at his right hand for 2 years now, who Harold on his deathbed had told to live a long time and have a child. Flint had not had a child yet. Flint had met a woman, though. Bear had told him, "You ask her to dinner, brother." So Flint had, and the woman had said yes. He stood in the cemetery and looked at his mother's stone, and he thought about all of these people, and he thought, this is what family is. He walked back to his bike. He swung a leg over the saddle. Somewhere in the warm Georgia morning, a horn honked. Maybe it was a car on the road past the cemetery. Maybe it was a kid messing with his father's pickup in the lot of the small grocery store at the corner. Maybe. Bear Garrison smiled. He started his engine. He rode home.